Hey, it's the Badass Records Podcast, a podcast about people and music. New episodes drop Thursdays. You can find your audio where you stream or visit the YouTube channel. Speaking of YouTube, you can keep up to tabs with the pod over on YouTube or on Instagram or Twitter. The site is badassrecordspodcast.com. While you're there, please make sure to check out the merch store. Get yourself a coffee mug, a sticker, a hoodie, who knows. Appreciate you stopping by. If you want to be on an episode in person with me here in KC, hit me up at badassrecordspodcast@gmail.com. It's badassrecordspodcast@gmail.com. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you enjoy the show.
Okay.
Episode 77, I think. Badass Records Podcast. Patrick Sprehe.
Yeah, like a spray can.
Like a spray can.
Perfect.
Hanging out. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Great, Blair. I think we've already talked an hour
We
off air.
we lost a whole episode just bullshit.
I'm going to bring the cot. I guess we're rolling live
right?
now.
We are. So thank you for being here. We wound up messaging on Instagram and kind of threw out the idea of you doing one of these, and then we got serious about it. And we have a list and dates and all this stuff, and finally it's like, where do you live? And you're like, dude, I could walk to your house in 10 minutes.
I jogged by here today, Blair.
Did you really?
I'm seriously 5 minutes away.
Nice.
It's awesome. My cousin's right in between us, too.
That's great. I was calling on Flying Horse when they were still kind of working in the liquor store.
Yeah.
And it was not even, they hadn't even dug up that first piece of asphalt yet.
Yeah.
Got to know one of the brothers pretty well. The other one I don't think I could ever pin down, but I feel like I saw you say or post something somewhere. It's like one of your faves.
I just posted something. I think his name is Chill Phil. He's a
'Kay.
steel drum player.
Yes, that's
just
what it
so
was.
happened to be jamming
Outdoors.
So they have a little space in the back.
Okay.
And I actually reached out the other day again about, guys, if you're interested in live music, I think your neighbors would appreciate it if you brought it to a boil like the 8. The problem is just sunny back there.
Oh.
But we're in conversations.
Okay.
And as I mentioned before too, I just feel like there is absolutely no live music or anything even music related where we live over here. Like, I don't want to call exactly Brookside, but the 63rd corridor, and I would extend that up to like 75th, like Waldo.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned again before, I grew up going to record stores in middle school, high school, and college with my close friend and business partner, Jim Andrews. And I think about young kids today, they don't have that experience. Your first concert shouldn't necessarily be, no offense to Taylor Swift, but whatever.
That's this city. I feel like the city was vibing for the whole week.
Yeah, trust me.
Like,
I knew nothing about her until all my nieces and nephews informed me.
So my oldest is sprinting to age 13.
Okay.
She can't grow up fast enough.
Grade.
She's going to 7, and I just want to like rewind,
Simmer.
So I've happily dipped my toes in the water, whatever she's into at the time, and I love Taylor Swift, and so I decided I need a candidate. I want to do a little mini series. I've done a couple. I had a guy come back for a second episode, and we did the whole Tom Waits discography.
Oh, wow.
I had somebody after March 3rd when praise the lawyers of the world when the De La Soul discography.
Oh, yeah.
Finally.
Yes.
So I had a dude come, and we did all of the Tribe and all of the De La records in one episode.
What episode is that?
61.
Okay. Note to self. I think I saw that image, but I didn't research that one.
And then I'm doing right now a series with a fella, and we're tackling all of the Wu-Tang, which is 80 record, because all the side.
Yeah.
So anyway. I want to start another one called Becoming a Swiftie.
Oh, for sure.
And I've so far I started at the first record. I've made it through 1989. I knew Lover because it was like very much on my radar when it came out, and You Need to Calm Down, it was a banger, a banger. And anyway, so I'm not quite through the discography, but I'd love to sit down as a novice and have an expert in the chair and talk Taylor
Probably
Swift.
your daughter.
Well, no.
Not that.
No.
Not that deep?
No, she has said since before episode 1 that she wants to do an episode, and I was like, you got to pick a record.
Yeah.
And you got to go listen to it. And
Yeah.
it was going to be Olivia Rodrigo's record for a little while, and then it was going to be a Casey Musgrave, but she never, she's
Yeah.
would rather TikTok and.
Well, at least let her sit in when you have the resident expert.
Oh,
come in.
for sure. But anyway, no disrespect to Taylor Swift. You were saying.
I was just trying to say that I think that, and let me know if my volume's not good or my face is messed up. I don't know that should necessarily be someone's first concert experience.
And you'll never
I wouldn't
top
say
it.
first, but having access to live music, whether it's a singer-songwriter on a guitar, a keyboardist, a vocalist, to, I'm sure that would be an interesting podcast too. I'm sure out there somewhere, like, what was your first concert?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What was your entryway into live
Yeah.
music? Everything from arena shows to somebody in my church.
Yeah.
And we just don't really. And we don't talk about this in the music industry. We just don't really have that many live music venues. I mean, traditional venues, ticketed venues in Kansas City. We have a lot of ancillary businesses like a pizza place or a coffee shop where we can have some, or even a record store. But having something in our neighborhood where people could come on, say, a Tuesday or Thursday night, happy hour at 5:30, maybe no alcohol, not encouraging people to drink, and where we're done with the show by 8, and people can actually get home and then have a functional day the next day.
Yeah.
And for musicians, even, that could be their first gig of the night. They could still hit something
Right.
else later on.
Yeah.
Assuming the venues were
Yeah,
cool with that.
right.
It was like a radius clause or whatever. But
Hopefully, yeah, that's very cool.
So-
You are owner or partner in Center Cut Records. Here's I'd like to talk just briefly about it, and then I want to do a little bit of Patrick Sprehe bio.
Okay.
I want to hit your list, and then I want to get back to Center Cut a little bit more.
Okay.
If that.
Understood.
So
I've tried to follow your formats.
yeah, I mean it's a little rubber, but I think
That's
sometimes
important.
yeah.
We did the same thing with when we had our Center Cuts podcast. So like try to structure it a certain way. I just think it lets your audience get familiar
Exactly.
with that. Also trying to have it same day of the
Which
week.
is still available on Spotify.
It's available.
38, I think you guys.
Yeah, we made so Michelle Bacon was gracious enough to let us Jedi mind trick her into working with us, and so we kind of had an arrangement where I would do 3 episodes with I'm going to call him our producer, Chris Mowry,
Okay.
who's booking shows and managing down at the Ship.
Nice.
Previously at Record Bar, Lemonade Park. And then every 4th episode, Michelle would bring someone in to talk about a woman's, or let's just put it this way, a non-dude's perspective on the music industry.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And
I wish my ratio was that good. I have so
Yeah.
many dudes and so few ladies.
yeah,
But it's okay.
Not to get off track already, but I'm sure I will. Mark Manning, who's got an unbelievable radio show on Wednesdays called Wednesday Midday Medley on 90.1 KKFI.
Okay.
He's very intentional, Blair, about bringing in guests. I mean, he plays all kinds of music, a lot of Kansas City, and he calls it mid-coastal music.
Nice.
So Lawrence as well. He's very intentional in trying to represent guests that, whether it's gender, race, age, genre, whatever, I feel like Center Cut's mission really was to represent, we had 3 goals I mentioned, was to represent the Kansas City artists on a national, even international level, regardless of genre.
Cool.
It could be hip-hop,
Yeah.
it could be country, it could be speed metal, for all we care. It had to be excellent. And so kind of the same thing with the podcast. I think being intentional as much as possible. And, schedules don't always allow for that. You get 3 white dudes in a row. That's
Yeah.
just the way,
Or
just the way
9.
dominoes fall. Or not, right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you do the best you can. But anyway, yeah, I'm a lifelong educator. I studied at the University of Kansas, got
Nice.
my
Rock
bachelor's in education. Yeah, grew up here in Kansas City, went to Rockhurst High School.
Okay.
And that's where I met my business partner, Jim Andrews.
Right. What year did you get out of Rockhurst?
I'm old. I graduated in 86, or we're old. Jim's older than me.
Okay.
By about 3 weeks, which I like to let him know. Anyway, and I'll come back to like kind of how we started listening to music. But anyway, I had taught forever. I joined the Peace Corps. I served
Nice.
in Kazakhstan right at the fall of the Soviet Union. I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina taught at a community college teaching refugees and immigrants English as a second language. Taught in an international baccalaureate magnet middle school, 6th grade for a couple years. Then I moved to Oakland, taught at a language school in Berkeley, California for a few years. Met a young lady who's Korean. She'd actually been living in Japan for several years before coming to the States to study for a year. We met towards the end of her year. She went back to Japan. I followed her about a year later. We had a child, got married, and just decided Tokyo was no place to raise a kid. And so I said, Kansas City's not Berkeley. It's not the Bay Area, but we could probably buy a house there someday. I bet I can find a job. And so we moved back here in 2005. I fell into an awesome teaching position at Academy Lafayette. It's a French immersion school, charter school. I taught middle school English for 13 years there. Loved it. I love literature. We were just talking about creative arts. I love writing. I love grammar. I'm that guy.
Gary Snyder of The Beat
Yeah.
is always he is I have a pull to Japan. Like, I've done very little travel in my days, but like I still like that. Man, not
awesome
rural,
experience.
not Tokyo. I mean, I would like to check it out, but I think going
Awesome
to Japan
experience.
would be.
People are just generally kind and polite. They were in Kazakhstan too, for that matter. Probably the safest place I will ever live. Like, there is no threat of violence at any point. You can walk down whatever street in the busiest or most rural places at 4:00 in the morning. No problems at all. It's a whole other story.
Yeah.
And grateful for our time there. But so we moved back here, and then about 2017, my old high school friend Jim Andrews, who is part owner of Andrews McMeel Universal, approached me about maybe making a career change. And I said at that time, I love teaching. I love crazy teenagers. They give me a lot of energy. I really feel the importance of that impact. If you can just influence one child, even just one decision, or putting a period at the end of their sentence, I feel fulfilled, regardless of the pay. But I said, if I could do one more thing, I'd like to have a music center, a place where we could have like a library, like I'm looking in your room, books about music, like research opportunities, musical instruments for sale, repair, lessons, high-end listening room, karaoke, no coffee, alcohol. That was my business model. And I still want to make it happen, Blair. As I mentioned, I'm looking at properties here along 63rd and in Waldo. He's like, oh, it's a great idea, Pat, and we'll do it someday, but let's start a record label first.
Why?
I'm like, what?
Why?
Well, that should have been my first question.
Okay.
My question was, what does that even mean?
Sure.
And I don't even know if we had the answer at that time. Jim and I met and really kind of started hanging out when we could drive. So, like sophomore year in high school.
Uh-huh.
And our other friends were like being healthy and playing in team sports. We would go to, as you mentioned, Peaches, 75th and Metcalf, Exile, probably my favorite record store ever, right across the street, where I still have a couple Elvis Costello t-shirts and bootleg cassettes. Of course, Penny Lane, the trifecta, Street Side and Music Exchange in Westport. And we would literally spend hours going through vinyl. CDs hadn't... I didn't get into CDs until college.
Sure.
Probably 87, 88. But cassettes were certainly around. But vinyl mainly and cassettes. And we would just like get these stashes, these collections of stuff. I'm like, dude, where'd you get that? I'll trade you this one I found. We'd like promotional copies. Maybe more than Jim, love reading liner notes.
Yeah.
I need to know who played on what cut. I need to know where that studio was. I want to read the lyrics. I want to see the pictures. I want to see the ephemera, like concert bills, all that cool shit.
And I mean, not quite so much with the used, but definitely with the brand new, there was a smell about that paper with that liner. Oh, man.
Someone was just actually talking about that the other day. Not only that, in cassettes, like the different smell of the different products. Man, I remember like the CDs, they used to have that.
Yeah.
I still have a couple, like the handle thing. You just walk out there like in your arms.
Yeah.
And so that's how we, started becoming close friends.
So at no point did you ever ask why?
Well, let's go one more step back. And so Jim and I went our separate ways in college, but we kept in touch. We'd see each other holidays and, of course, summer break. And then after college, he was kind of in and out of Kansas City, but we saw each other. And then when I went to Kazakhstan, he would send me like mixtapes of there with a couple of my other really close friends. I mean, like lifesavers. Like seriously, say you couldn't. It would take like 2 months to get a package over there. People would rifle through your stuff, because they needed money. And so I was so grateful when I'd get
What people?
in Kazakhstan,
Oh.
former Soviet Union.
Okay.
Yeah. At that point, it was really, sorry to say, almost like a third world country.
Sure.
Like they went from communism to capitalism in about a year, and that was not a good transition.
Rooting through your packages that would eventually
yeah,
make
taking
their
my
way.
food, taking clothes. Yeah.
Okay.
Nicest people ever.
Sure.
Cannot be more thankful to the people that supported me over there.
Yeah.
Saved my life, and a life-changing experience.
I bet.
Encourage anyone to do one of two things. A, serve your country in some manner, whether it's military, the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, volunteer. You only got one shot to make a difference in the world. And two, it's live abroad.
Right.
Don't go travel for a week to Europe, or if you can, actually go live in another culture. It just teaches you so much empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're all just the same.
Yeah.
And at that time, the Soviet Union was like the evil empire, and we were the capitalist pigs, which
So-
we still are.
We still are, for sure.
But it made me kind of step in their
Capital C,
shoes.
capital P.
Yeah, literally, and see, like, their first question is, why do we all have guns? Like, I don't know. I never really thought about that. I don't have a gun.
Right.
But, yeah, I do know a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
we
kept in touch.
You served over there and were in the Peace Corps over there?
Yeah,
That
served in
was
the Peace Corps. So volunteered for 2 years.
Okay.
It's usually a 2-year agreement.
But you were not in the armed forces?
No.
Okay.
No, I just think that people in a lot of countries, it's just what you do, for a year, year and a half, 2 years.
I have a group of 10 high school, but it was 10, whatever. We're mostly still very much connected. And two of them both went to Africa. One was in Senegal.
Yeah.
And the other was in, it's escaping me, but he did 5 years.
Yeah.
And actually killed a guy.
Oh, wow.
Total accident.
Oh, wow.
Driving some whatever Toyota 4Runner he had, and I think, and a bicyclist was right and cut in front of. Yeah, and like it for a minute, like they wanted him out, and
wow.
Like, it was wild. But
wow.
It's installing fisheries, fish hatchery.
Yeah, that's huge. It's agriculture, education, and in the case of the former Soviet Union at that time, it was business. So bringing in experts like in banking, or so we could impose capitalism on them.
Yeah, there is that.
And I know several people that served in Senegal as well. But anyway, Jim and I kept in touch. Like I said, had moved away to all those different places. And when we came back here in 2005, reconnected. And so it had been in his mind. And so that summer of 2017, when he proposed it, I just started doing some due diligence. I was a school teacher at the time.
I'm sorry, summer of...
2017.
2017. Okay.
Yeah, so 6 years ago.
Now we're like the wheels are turning for this record label.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I wasn't teaching summer that year, and I just started doing some due diligence. Like, are there other record labels in Kansas City? At that time, Blair, I probably was going to about 100 concerts a year.
Wow.
But mainly national acts. I saw a lot, and maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe it was 80. I certainly went to a lot of shows.
That's still a ton.
Yeah, actually. But I'd seen plenty of Kansas City artists, so I kind of knew some that I would maybe potentially like to be interested in releasing their music. Started to talk to some venue owners. We had a couple of really key supporters. One is Brenton Cook, who I'd love for you to talk to as well.
Yeah.
He's owner of Haymaker Records.
Nice.
Haymaker kind of specializes, I think, of sort of like off the beaten path types of music. I'm sure at one point they've talked about like psych, or I don't want to pigeonhole him either, so I'd rather have him explain it. But he sat down with us and gave us some like demographics, a little bit of like, this is where I get my CDs pressed or records pressed. This is kind of what it would cost you for initial runs, some food for thought. We were actually very interested in one of the artists that he was working with, Schwervon. I don't know if you know that band. SCHWERVON exclamation point. So we had a meeting with them too about potentially like releasing a split something. And then Jim Andrews, my business partner, was spending a lot of time, and still does, at the record store Records with Merit. Another couple of people you might want to talk to.
Absolutely. I've been into that Records with Merit and Mills, and made I didn't really have, sort of a lid
Yeah.
on what the purchase is going to look like.
Yeah.
But I left out of there both places with way less money than
Yes.
And so I got a knot.
Yes.
But I need to get back in and just
Yes,
say hello.
I've been known to drop a little bit of coin in both those establishments, and pretty much every record store in Kansas City today. They all have their unique. They're like children. They have their unique personality. They have their unique way of doing things. I love them all. Quirks. They've all been super supportive. But Merritt, and Ann Stewart in particular really took the time to kind of shepherd us in. We had a couple meetings with Marion. She gave us some names of some artists we should consider pursuing. And then introduced us to a couple of other very influential people. One was, we mentioned Steve Tulipana, co-owner of Record Bar and Mini Bar with Sean Stewart, and also, I don't know his exact title with Lemonade Park, but created that with Wes Gardner from Voltaire, the live music venue in the pandemic. And Steve talked with us, actually met us with Don Simon, he does a lot of different law, but kind of was helping us how to structure a contract or an agreement, because
necessary.
You just never thought about these things, because they were also kind of starting a record label, a limited one. And then last but and definitely not least, Merritt introduced us to Mark Manning, who I mentioned has the show at KKFI every Wednesday midday medley from 10 to 12. Had a couple lunches with Mark, and Mark's just a beautiful human being. I mean, his radio program, as I mentioned, really is intentional about including as many voices as possible concerning music and other topics too. And he kept mentioning this artist Calvin Arsenia, who Marion had mentioned, who Steve Tulipana had mentioned, and talking to more people. Several people mentioned, like, well, if everybody's telling me I should go check this guy out. And so we had a lunch, the second time we met Mark one day on a Thursday. He's like, oh yeah, Calvin's playing at some church on Sunday, and I can't go, but you might want to go check him out. And I'm like, okay, Sunday night, 6:00, I can do that. I go to this place. I come to find out now it's a repurposed church. Peregrine Honig, she's an amazing artist here in Kansas City, visual, like painting, sketching, converted this space into her studio / performance space. And so I have no idea what to expect. I'll admit I'd had a cocktail or two and maybe some other thing to make me feel happy going. I'm pretty sure.
Quarter shrooms.
Yeah. No.
I'm joking.
Not that league.
Yeah.
Can't
figure out how to make your door work, man.
Well, and that's it. I don't know anybody there. There's a stair, a rickety staircase to go up, and I did recognize one person there. My name's on the list. They tell me to take my shoes off. I'm like, that's cool. I take my shoes off in my house, and I walk in, and there's this artist with his back to me.
Oh my God!
Spot now. He's tall, which I can tell even seated, and he's the most incredible music. He's playing a harp, which I knew. Wow. They had told me he played a harp.
Okay.
I'm like, what the hell is this? There are people are lying around and I don't know.
Garments?
Yes, garments, interesting garments.
Drapes.
Practically, they have these little whatever craft cocktail there. It's a really informal space, and they're all seated. So I go stand behind them, and I'm telling you, Blair, for the next 30 minutes, I'm completely mesmerized. And again, I've seen a lot of shows at this point.
30?
Maybe 45.
Wow. And you said 0 words?
I'm
just
just
took it in?
I'm just in shock. What is this? He's playing originals. He's also playing songs I just have such a personal connection to, like George Gershwin's Summertime. Who originally wrote Nature Boy? Nat King Cole made that popular. George Benson did it too. I don't know. Wes Montgomery does an awesome version of that. And he does this song that I don't recognize at that time. I thought it was like a Beyonce song. It turns out it's Toxic. I didn't know that Britney Spears song.
Oh,
that time.
That one's annoying.
Oh my God, his version. I mean, I've got hair on the back of my neck, which never happened.
I bet. But I mean, oops, I did it again. All these other, and then she came out with that, and I was like, this is grating.
Yeah,
it was too fast paced and hype. Anyway, I'm sure.
So he then gets up from the harp. He's got a guitar for a couple songs. He's got a banjo, and then he walks behind me, and I realized at that point, oh yeah, there were 3 musicians behind me. There was a guy at a piano, there was a percussionist, And I guess there was a vocalist, not a musician. But I'd forgotten about that.
This is just like a hang.
Yeah,
like
they're this far away from me.
On a Tuesday.
Sunday night.
What? Oh, right.
And I'm probably really extending the story.
This is the 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Oh,
So it's now. It's
so
like
it isn't
6:30.
organized. You didn't just walk into people.
No,
That's what
and
they
there
were
like
doing.
maybe 50, 60 people there.
Oh,
I
cool.
wasn't 100.
Wow.
He goes and sits at the piano, equally as skilled there, plays a couple songs, and then when he goes back, now the percussionist and the pianist and the other vocalist join him for like another half an hour for the set. I am just blown away.
Jeez.
I go up to him after the show. Again, I'm shy. I don't know how to do this. I'm like, hey, Calvin, pleasure to meet you. My name's Patrick Sprehe. I'm a school teacher, and I'm thinking about starting a record label. Could I talk to you sometime? I think you're, great. He's like, sure. When do you want to do it? I'm like, next week. He's like, looks at his phone. How about Tuesday? Okay. So I walk out of there. I buy a couple CDs. I'm total fanboy. I talk to the person who designed the CD cover, Chris Dong, is an amazing graphic designer, just beautiful human being. I'm like, I get in my car. I had a flip phone at that time.
Oh, wow.
I'm very anti-social media, pre-record label. I mean, I still am. I have to do it. My students are, Mr. Sprehe, you need a smartphone for Christ's sakes. I'm like, no, I don't. You need to be on Facebook. No, I don't. I don't need you to see what I'm doing when I'm not wearing a tie.
Yeah.
So I text my
You
Jim
wear a tie every day at Lafayette?
every day.
If
If they're gonna wear that stupid, no, everybody else was casual. If they're gonna wear that stupid uniform, I'm gonna look sharp for them.
Okay,
so that's kind of my attitude.
I like it.
They gotta tuck their shirts in. I better not look like I just walked off the beach.
Yeah, but
like some of my colleagues, each their own.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
So I get in the car and I text Jim, and I'm like, and I wish I still had my flip phone. I'm like, Jim, if we're ever gonna start this label, that's the chosen one. I see Jim the next day. I take him one of the copies of the CD, and then Jim tells a story. He's driving down the road in his car, puts the CD in, and he basically is so entranced he practically drives his car off the road.
Wow.
He forgets he's driving.
It's meant to be, man.
So, long story short now, to put it all in the context, we were talking about a record label. We were making some inroads, due diligence. A couple people, influential, important, respected people, told us we should check out this artist. And when we heard Calvin, we're like, we got to do this now.
You both were entranced in your own ways.
We got to do it now.
Him studio and you live.
Because Calvin was going to go over to Europe that summer, and we were kind of worried, like, what if another label,
scoops him?
The question was, why is nobody working with him, actually?
Yeah.
And I can talk about that later, not because of Calvin, but because of, like, the way record labels in general work in Kansas City, which is they're not for profit, at least in my experience, and which includes us. They're maybe not even intentionally being for profit. It's more about love of art, love of artists, wanting to preserve that artifact and get that music out there, which I totally respect.
Yeah.
But it wasn't our business plan. We wanted to make money. Mm-hmm. And so we got a business license. July of 2017, we made Calvin a one-page agreement because we wanted to keep it short and sweet, which we've been told. Thankfully, Calvin said, I'm not ready to do this right now. He went off to Europe. I knew I wasn't going to do the label full-time because I was teaching. Yeah. I wanted to teach my son, who was in 8th grade. So taught that fall, and then we reached out. We kept talking with Calvin, and like February of 2018, we reached a formal agreement with him to put out a record, hopefully a second record, hopefully a third. We didn't want to lock any of our artists into like, you got to put out 5 records and we're going to sit on them forever. It was more like...
You become a line in their wiki. They're trying to get out of that Center Cut Records deal, and everybody hated each other.
Like, let's put one out. Let's agree how we're going to promote it for a year.
Yeah.
At the end of that time, let's sit down and have a conversation. If you don't want to do it, if you don't feel comfortable, or if we don't, well, we can respectfully both walk away. No hard feelings.
Sure.
So we agreed to Calvin in February. We were in LA 3 weeks later recording what actually was his second album, LA Sessions. Jim had made some connections with Tony Bronigal, Grammy Award-winning producers, worked with Taj Mahal, Eric Burden and the Animals, Daniel Nicole right here in Kansas City, phenomenal artist. He brought in session players, Mike Finnegan, absolutely legendary Hammond B3 player who unfortunately passed.
Oh, damn.
2 years ago now. I'm going to the Stiefel Theater tomorrow night to go see Jeff Tweedy, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Mike Finnegan Theater. Like, Mike worked with Bonnie Raitt, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Like,
is that how you pronounce her last name?
Bonnie Raitt?
Yeah.
I believe so. Is it Raitt?
That's the only way I've ever heard it and said it.
I'm screwing it up. I always tell my students in English, like, you just pronounce it the way you've always been told until someone corrects you that actually knows what, and they may not know what they're talking about, so be careful. I said rate. Maybe it's rate.
I thought it was rate, but I don't know.
I don't know. Dad was okay. Anyway, Paul Brown, who's got like, I don't even know, 30 smooth jazz top 10, if not number 1 hits, still currently amazing guitarist. Freddie Washington, incredible bassist. He does the bass line on that song that Will Smith sampled for Men in Black. Patrice Rushen, Forget Me Nots. You know the bass line.
Okay.
Point is, David Garfield. I mean, these guys were just crack musicians. We recorded over 2 days.
That is so fast. 3 weeks and then 2 days.
We just jumped right in.
Wow.
I mean, I've never missed a day of really teaching in my life. I took a week off. I felt so guilty, but we had to do it.
Yeah.
Or Jim told me we had to do it.
Right.
And then when we came back from LA, and in LA, we're meeting with PR people out there. We met with some incredibly powerful people about like how do you promote a record. Of course, all the college radio, which we did a campaign for. We came back, and Calvin said he loved the process, but actually he wanted to put something out first that involved his Kansas City artist community. And we're like, all right, well, that one's in the pocket.
Can dig.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
And so he started to continue working. I got started on the album Cantaloupe, which we put out in the fall of 2018. We had a huge album release show at the Gem Theater. Calvin probably had about 20.
Gem, G-E-M?
Yeah, right across from the American Jazz Museum.
Down 18th and
Vine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Unfortunately, it's a little underused theater, but it's a beautiful space, holds about 500 people. And Calvin had this vision to bring people into the Jazz District, because I'll be frank, not a lot of folks, again, south of a certain neighborhood or west of us, they're not going there for horrible stereotypes. And so he brought in freaking tango dancers, violinists in the aisles. I mean, it was like the most incredible spectacle of a production I've ever seen in my life. At the end of the show, he had wasn't the Cobras, was it the Pythons? A drum line come in, and they basically marched the crowd of 450 people out onto the street. They did a loop around the block. I was inside cleaning, unfortunately, selling merch still. Did a loop around the block, and then they went to the Mutual Musicians Foundation.
Which is still
there.
Alive and breathing, right?
Do a lot of great people. Love them. And then they had like a second party, like an after party there. So that's how that got started. And I'll just give you a recap of the last 3 years in about 2 minutes. We put out another album with Calvin, which was the first one, LA Sessions, the fall of 2019. We were talking to other artists. We wanted to intentionally start with just one artist where we could give them all of our time. Be a phone call, a text, a meeting away. Again, not some dude in a suit in an office that's not returning your calls. Our goal was to get Calvin out on the road, spread, and I think that's the issue for Kansas City artists. You've got to get out of your home base. You have to get into other markets, or you're never really going to grow your audience.
Right.
And it was a little challenging not having connections. We didn't know venues in Colorado or Illinois or New York. We got some shows on the coast, which was great. In retrospect, I wish we had focused on the Midwest a little bit more and done some like 8-hour loops, like Chicago and back, or Dallas and back, or Denver and back, and places in between. But we'd started actively, I mean, I was probably meeting, and still these days, 2 or 3 artists a week, doing what we're doing right now, just kind of feeling them out, like, tell me about yourself. Like, why do you want to make music? What are your goals with music? I think there are 3 different strands artists will fall in there on that question. But I identified a couple other people that we felt really strong about. One was Fritz Hutchison, amazing singer and songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. He had recorded some things previously and kind of, I wouldn't even say self-released, like burned some CDs. And Jim and I thought it was gold. We're like, dude, why have more people not heard this record? And so we're like, let's package this right. Let's put it in again, we love liner notes. Like, let's get some beautiful pictures on here. Let's let people see your lyrics. Let's get you on college radio. Let's get you some press. Same thing for Calvin, right? And so we put out Fritz's record March 27th of 2020.
Okay.
2 weeks into the shutdown. Because, Blair, we already had like PR campaigns lined up. You know, we had thousands of dollars and months invested in these things. So we're like, well, and we didn't know how long it was going to last either.
Right.
Like, we just got to keep this promotional train going.
Yeah.
And at the same time, April 1st of 2020, so now we know we're in the pandemic, we agreed to work with our third artist, the Black Creatures.
Okay.
R&B, hip hop, neo soul, some electronic, Jade, Green, Xavier. I have to say, it's about all the artists we formerly worked with. All beautiful human beings,
Cool.
incredible integrity,
One would hope that
incredible work ethic.
only beautiful human beings are a part of
Yeah.
a project that you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that closed the deal, but we just genuinely felt like we care for them.
Yeah.
We want them to do well, which
Dude.
I think all record labels in Kansas City do. Like I said, I don't know if their motive is money, but they feel a connection to those artists whose music they're releasing, even if it's just released, digitally. And so we agreed to put out a record that they'd already released.
Oh.
But again, more formally.
Okay.
And there are ways to do that, like taking things down. But long story short, we dropped that album August of 2020. And the issue with the pandemic, and thank God, I hope you've been safe this whole time and healthy,
Yeah.
was live music just ceased to exist.
Yeah.
And as a school teacher, my first, priority for all my students is to keep them safe.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with my artists, our artists. I'm not going to put you in a situation where I'm afraid you're going to contract something that's going to kill you.
Right.
So we weren't like, you got to go play shows and sell these records. And by the way, I think I should mention, we make physical CDs. We're believers in physical products. We make vinyl records, also T-shirts.
Where?
The company, again, Brent and Cook from Haymaker turned us on to a company,
Okay.
Copycats Records in Minneapolis.
So you
Love them.
submit an order for a print of
I'm learning how to do all this on
50,
the fly.
110.
In general, we did 1,000 run of records
Okay.
for each project. We did 1,500 for one of Calvin's, and then we do about 1,000 run for CDs.
And they're stored where?
Multiple places.
Okay.
Jim's office has the bulk.
Okay.
I've kept.
Also, if any of this is like,
Oh no! No.
just say so.
We were fortunate and able. Again, Jim has some good connections, and actually, Marion Merritt from Records with Merritt helped us get distribution.
Oh.
So
if somebody places an order, it's not you guys like, oh shit, I gotta.
Well, it's both.
It's both.
It's
Okay.
both.
Fascinating.
So if someone goes to our website and orders from there, I fulfill those personally from my home. If somebody goes to Amazon or a record store, our distribution company fulfills those.
Cool.
And of course, they take a cut.
Of course.
And there's shipping costs.
Uh-huh.
So ideally, you'd want to sell them yourself.
Right.
Even better yet, have your artists sell them at their shows.
Right.
But that then assumes there are shows to sell them at.
Yeah.
It's the pandemic.
There is that.
So with the Black Creatures, so Fritz had no album release. There was no place to play. And he wasn't comfortable playing out that summer 2020. Just fine. Jade and Xavier, the Black Creatures, they had 2 shows at the new Lemonade Park. They were capped at 100 people each night. Sold them both out. The first night they were with Kadesh Flow.
Nice.
The second night they were with Calvin. They were phenomenal. We sold a bunch of records those 2 nights, and then we had no more shows. I did one other thing at the Ship. The Ship was doing some shows out in the alley. So they basically, it was sort of not a DIY. I mean, those 2 places kept music alive in Kansas City in the summer of 2020. So basically, the Ship flipped kind of like the smoking deck out there into the stage facing the alley, and then people would stand in the alley or bring lawn chairs or sit on the loading dock, and they had kind of a makeshift bar out there to sell drinks, and did that for the rest of the summer of 2020 and even into 2021. I believe it was all still in the alley, and then they opened up their new room. Maybe that was towards the end. I don't know exactly when that happened, but my point is, we had about 2 shows to sell the Black Creatures records and CDs and T-shirts, and we had about 1.5 shows to sell Fritz's.
No pressure.
So now we roll into 2021. This took more than 2 minutes. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
And I can just be frank here too. Fritz was eager to go back in the studio and record, that was the plan, right? Let's put out 1 record. Let's promote it for a year, and then let's put out a second record, and let's promote it for a year. Let's put out a third. But we had no chance to sell those records literally sitting in my living room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can we maybe do some shows here the next year and sell this beautiful thing that we created and put a lot of time and, frankly, money into? And Fritz was eager to go back and record. So, like, if that's what you want to do, then go with God. We can't finance that right now.
Ooh, okay.
Because I don't want to tell you how much
Yeah.
we were into it.
Yeah.
And specifically Jim.
Yeah.
So 2021, we pushed the Black Creatures record hard. It was voted named Album of the Year by Nick Spacek at the Pitch.
Cool.
Huge honor. Mark Manning had recognized it the previous year on his program as his, I believe, second favorite album. But that was great. We got a lot of press, some paid for, but also some just generated. I think in 2021, we had about 40 shows with them between May and let's say October. And we sold records.
Wow.
And we sold T-shirts.
Hey, how about that?
And it was like, okay, this could work.
This is
again
inventory that's been sitting on your shelves for a handful, half
but
a
again,
year.
a lot of venues are still not open. A
Yeah.
lot of venues are. It's still now today, Blair, a 10th full. I mean, it's people act like things are back to normal. I would not say that at all. For certain shows, perhaps, and very esteemed venues, every place from the Midland to I've been in places where it's a quarter full. National acts, huge acts. Like you're like, they could not have made money tonight.
No.
And I'm not calling out the Midland. I freaking love them.
Yeah.
So the Black Creatures were ready to put out a second record, so they went back into the studio and recorded. And
Locally?
Yeah.
Okay.
I should say that all of our artists are from Kansas City. Our goal is
No, but like you went to LA for the LA set.
That's the only one we went away for.
But you've recorded everything else here.
Yeah, partially in some studios, whether it was Massive Sound Studios with Chad Mize over in Merriam, Kansas.
Also went to high school with him.
Phenomenal engineer, hell of a guy. We have several other projects he's helped us out with, and that we're also considering.
Did he tell you? Did he tell you what his nickname was in high school?
No.
Moondog.
Moondog?
Moondog.
From what?
He had a big fro and wore tie-dye shirts and blue jeans every day of the week.
Oh, he's still got a. I mean, he's got a. I mean, I just chopped my ponytail less than a year ago.
Okay.
He's got a.
Nice.
He's got a healthy head of hair at his age too.
Nice.
And his father. I haven't told you about the second prong of the label detail. The second prong is to re-release albums that are out of print. We're calling it Buried Treasure.
That's
our focus for 2023.
I love it. Okay.
Or put out things that were never released. I can say this on air, but Chad passed us something right before the pandemic that his dad had recorded recently that hasn't come out, and we would love to put out that record. I think Greg Mize is he's a freaking legend.
Oh my God! Wait a second.
That's his dad. Hammond B3 player.
Okay.
Phenomenal. And Chad has hours of him playing live like the ship.
I mean, my first 8 years back in Kansas City, I was chefing at McCoy's.
Oh.
And
was he the house?
Every Thursday night.
Residency.
Every Thursday night. And it was, it was prime rib night for us. So every Thursday I'm making prime rib and bakers and whatever.
Yeah.
And he's coming in. He had a female vocalist with him, and it was more or less the same set list every week. But he was fantastic. I didn't know that was his dad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was he playing piano or Hammond? Was it organ or?
Yeah, it was
he plays both.
It was an organ.
Well,
because they would have to pack in and pack out for the get,
It's a heavy piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And I have it on my phone here. We're talking back during the pandemic 2020. I sat down with Greg in Chad's studio in Merriam, massive, and Paul Malinowski also. I don't know if they Conan. I don't know their arrangement, but produces some incredible music there. Like the new Mike Dillon records. They're both super talented. But I got these interviews with Greg where he's telling me about back in the day in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, wow.
Playing out 7 nights a week, working musician. So that's kind of a dream project that we've really made a lot of progress on. So we've done some recording there, or artists have. We basically just ask our artists, where do you want to record? Do you want to record at home?
Right.
Like the Black Creatures?
Right.
They basically do things laptop-based in different spaces. Do you want to go to a local studio? Like Fritz had done some recording at Element Records. Okay. Another great engineer, Joel Nanos. He just moved his studio over to the west side. There's a great article in the Pitch about 2 weeks ago.
There's not still print copies of the Pitch. It's all...
Yeah, they're physical copies.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Again, the Pitch has been so good to our artists. I think Calvin has now been voted best musician in Kansas City 5 years running.
Dang.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So the Black Creatures were voted best local album last year.
Cool. That's awesome.
I mean, we've had incredible accolades. Calvin's been in Billboard.
So the three are put out new or record and release projects for local people. Put out like re-release stuff and put out stuff that was never released.
Buried treasure. That's the second prong.
Oh, that's the second prong.
Third prong is we just want to build a music industry in Kansas City. And a lot of what I've talked about here is the music community, which I would say Kansas City's music community is second to none.
Okay.
People here are so generous of their time.
So you can have a community without an industry.
I don't think they're the same thing.
No, I know, but I mean, like, you would think if you did have both, they would thrive, they would feed off each other, or no?
I think there's overlap. I think there's some interconnectedness. To me, the music industry means more things like business-wise. We have management opportunities here for artists to work with managers who can take those artists to another level. I think a lot of artists say they need managers, and I believe them. I think it's mainly for administrative tasks that are tedious and not desirable by anybody.
Yeah,
and they want that off their plate.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
Trying to do some of those things when you're trying to create music and practice and rehearse, do the show, lug your stuff to it. I get it. But to me, that's not what a manager should be. A manager should be someone who is going to, of course, be someone you trust, but someone who's going to open doors for you or take you to opportunities and or make sure that all the stuff you signed in that agreement with the venue, whomever, is being met. And they're there as like the intermediary in case something goes wrong, because the artist doesn't have to deal with that.
Right.
Agents, booking agencies, promotion companies. We have some, don't get me wrong. We have some. Press. It's a major issue here in Kansas City. No offense to the Kansas City Star, but they basically have no local music coverage probably since Tim Finn left, who I think is one of the finest writers ever. 2018 was that? We met with Tim about that time we started, maybe 2019. There's nothing in there. You've got places like The Pitch, who we love. Nick Spacek's awesome. Brock Wilbur's great new owner. Stephanie Carey was great. Super supportive. You've got somebody again like KKFI, Community Radio.
Mm-hmm.
I've mentioned Mark Manning, Diane Ennis. I mean, Wednesday's my favorite day. You've got The Bridge. We were talking off air about a couple people. Michelle Bacon worked with us on the podcast. I mean, she does such beautiful writing for that paper. It's really the only writing besides Nick's out there. I would include, and I can't forget Chris Agarian at The Bridge, who's got a show every Tuesday, the 8160. It's actually on tonight from 6 to 7, covering a ton of Kansas City artists. And it's not writing, but I know he writes that stuff down, so he's a talented writer too.
Sure.
It's just not necessarily in print.
Right.
I mean, the whole staff at The Bridge, Sarah Bradshaw, Brian Truda, Skylar Rochelle, they're phenomenal. They're not a huge corporate radio station. Their reach is not going to be what the stations that I don't listen to are. And who even listens to the radio these days anyhow? That's a whole other question.
That dude we were talking about.
Right.
Kersey once is Bob Seger's greatest hits.
Do the same. Anyway, running against the wind. You've got Falia Fani with iHeart Local Music in Lawrence doing great things. She's an awesome writer, a hell of a photographer as well. But again, the reach just isn't there necessarily. We need some smaller venues, 100, 150 cap places where you're paying $5, $10. I mean, people balk at paying $5 at a place for 3 bands for 4 hours. You're like, what? How do you think they're even going to pay the door person? Like conversations about these things, but I guess what I'm talking about, like guidelines, like how do you teach an artist? And I'm so green. I always say I feel like I'm a first-year school teacher all the time. Like my learning curve is just like this. I'm constantly learning things because I ask a lot of questions, probably, which is annoying to some people.
No, it's great.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's just trained. So if
annoying is when you no longer have the desire to learn. That's like an annoying.
Well, yeah, I'm a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
so if I'm stupid, I have no problem being told that or admitting it.
Right.
Just tell me how I don't look stupid anymore.
Right.
But like the concept of an album release, like what does that look like? I mean, I cannot tell you how many times in the last week, month, 5 years, artists I've seen spend a bunch of time, artistic process, care, attention to create one song or an EP or record of just sheer magnificence. And they're so eager to release that baby into the world, and I don't know this because I'm not an artist, that they decide that tomorrow they're going to just drop it because I just had to get it out, or because it's fall, or I've been sitting on this for so long, I just figured, screw it.
Perfect, all of which are perfect
I get
reasons. reason, right?
No one's going to hear your record.
I know.
No one's
No,
going to
you gotta
hear
have
it.
a party and
You need 100 parties.
a tour.
You need so, and that's another misnomer.
Meet and
Oh, I had an
greet.
album release show, and then you didn't promote it for 6 months. That's why those CDs are still sitting in your living room.
Yeah.
You have to have a way to keep that going. And again, I'm green, and the record industry is changing, and rules about promotional strategies and timelines change too. And some people, like Taylor, can break all those rules because they've got billions of people watching them. But I'll just wrap it up here to that last point. To those artists who are saying, man, I just got to get this record out. Oh, I can't wait until I have enough shows lined up or some press lined up. When we started and formally really in practice in 2018, I was told and read in numerous publications there were 40,000 songs a day being uploaded to Spotify. I mean, you and I can put a song on Spotify right now if we want to.
Sure.
Doesn't mean it's any good.
No.
So that's another thing. Like, just because you put your song on Spotify doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah.
And that's another thing we need in Kansas City are critics. Like, not everybody can be amazing or awesome or fantastic or the best. Like, these superlatives just get thrown around, and I'm like, it's not that good.
No.
I like you. You're a
Yeah.
good person. I bet you
Yeah.
work hard. But that song's weak.
So signing folks, buried treasure, music industry. I
Yeah.
love it. Brilliant.
Last point on that, though. So 40,000 songs a day were released in
Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
So that's 1.2 million a month.
Okay.
1.2 million a month. In 2022, they said it's 1 million songs a day. So
Wow.
30 million songs a month. And so what I say to artists is you could have the best song structure. You could have the most incredible instrumentation ever. You could have compelling, thoughtful lyrics or silly lyrics like the B-52s. You could do all these great things, but if you don't promote that, no one's going to hear it.
Yeah.
It's released into the ether.
Yeah.
Ether.
That was the whole, near the end of my graduate program, creative writing program at UMKC. It was like, okay, so like you've got an idea of what it takes to write down the bones, and now you've got a good set of editing skills.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and one of my key workshop professors always said one thing about the Midwest. Yeah, the people in New York have an edge because they're in New York, but nobody's ever going to outwork you.
Yeah.
As a grown Midwesterner, the work ethic that's in there. But like if you are lucky enough to see your novel through to print, whether you do it yourself or you hire somebody, and whatever. Now your book's on the shelf at Barnes and Noble, or you have a box of 500 in your living room. You got to get on the road,
Yeah.
and you got to do signings,
Yeah.
and you got to do readings, and you got to like
Never ends.
essentially live out of your car until you almost hate, and then come home, and now it's time to start the new tributary of whatever this body is that is in sport. I mean, you don't just write your book and
Yeah.
I wonder why it's not selling. I mean, you got.
I hear you.
So
And Jim would totally agree in the publishing world. Actually, Andrews McMeel published Calvin's book of poetry.
oh, cool.
Not just poetry.
Where did they
drawing.
go from 45 Main? Did they go down to River Market?
No, it's like 14th and Walnut
Okay.
or something. It's a beautiful building, the Boley building.
But it was a significant downsize in space, right?
I never went in the old space when we were in high school. The two I know.
Well,
don't know.
Do you know the building?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
ginormous. It was half
for
the
sure.
investment firm and half
For sure.
Andrews McMeel, and
For sure.
they had to lose a lot of folks, and I think find a place that was maybe more affordable to live in as an opera. But
Possibly.
anyway,
Possibly. But to your point, the hard working aspect I get, and I've never doubted our artists, and in general, most of the artists that I'm speaking with, their work ethic. But just because it's like my wife, she's again living in Japan. Just because you're working 80 or 90 hours a week, it doesn't mean you're productive, and it also doesn't mean you're efficient.
it means you're tired. That's for sure.
Right. So let's prioritize. Like, what is the most important thing to you? You've got 16 different. All of our artists are so diverse. They could make music in multiple different genres, which is kind of a great thing, but it's also a curse because they know how to market it. But anyway, you get involved in all these different concepts and projects. It's like, would you maybe just pick one and let's like really get behind it, like the Black Creatures did last year, when, with the second record we released, they did like 80 shows, Blair, in about 6 months.
Dang.
And for the first time ever, I saw we broke even on the costs of producing, the recording costs, the manufacturing of CDs, of the T-shirts. We didn't pay for press for that one. It basically was all in-house. And we made money.
Hey, how about that?
But I also know how much work that was
Yeah.
and how much time it took me in addition to the artists. And it's a grind, man. It's not for everybody. It's a hard life. Like being out on the road, it's a hard life. It's like a minor league baseball player.
Like the scene in True Romance,
Yeah.
where Christopher Walken comes to sit with.
Who is that?
It's
I forgot about that movie.
Jesus. Anyway, and he offers him a Chesterfield, and he says no, and finally he pops him in the mouth, and he says, "That's as good as it's gonna get. I can tell you, it won't get that good again." Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
come home from your whatever tour, support of all of the and
Yeah.
spent and
Yeah.
exhausted, and it's
Yeah.
like, let's come on, man.
Yeah.
Just you broke even and saw a little shred of profit,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Get right back in there, man.
Yeah.
You know.
If it's full time,
So
would that take an hour?
yeah, so nobody's keeping track. But Center Cut Records has a healthy link tree on Instagram. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, right?
And I haven't updated it in a minute.
But what are so you can definitely find Center Cut on Instagram. You guys have a .com as well, right?
Yeah, and again, I just talked to our web developer. I have not really updated that or maintained it.
Okay.
Calvin, so as I mentioned, Fritz is doing his own thing. He's actually working with Manor Records, another great Kansas City label. You should certainly talk to those folks. Their model's a little bit different. They recently became a nonprofit, so we're not formally promoting his, although we'd still love to sell the records
Sure.
and CDs
Yeah.
and T-shirts, and want to see him do as well as possible and make a career making music.
Yeah.
Calvin, not exactly the same situation, but Calvin is actually going to release his first record since 2019, I think this summer. It's technically up on his website.
Okay.
He had an album release show about 2 weeks ago. So, again, we're not really necessarily promoting it. We're still selling his records and CDs. And then the Black Creatures, Jade and Xavier, after, like I said, 80 shows last year in about 6 months, they've been on a hiatus probably since October. And what we kind of talked with them about is, if and when you're ready to jump back in, let's keep having conversations because we freaking love you and we're so proud of you. But our focus this year is more on let's get back to this idea of this buried treasure.
Right.
Kind of almost like a legacy, Blair. Jim and I are not getting any younger.
Yeah.
There's some projects we feel really strongly about. Let's get those out and try to promote them. If we make money, that would be awesome.
Sure.
And then let's focus on more music industry stuff, which is trying to promote things through socials. I haven't really been active on that website at all. I feel pretty bad.
Well,
and
but
not really booking shows.
The reason I ask, though, is because me personally, I think that those three prongs or whatever beautiful, magnificent. I love it. I'm so happy that somebody here in the area has that kind of thinking and that kind of passion. Even if I would have come up with that sort of business model myself, I don't even know if I would have ever taken the first half step.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad. And so I ask because if anybody's listening to this or watching it and thinks it's cool as well, and you guys are growing as a thing and trying to make, so how can they keep up?
Yeah.
Is it Instagram? Is that the spot? Or is it your .com or?
Yeah, probably just following us on socials.
Okay.
I try to post 4 to 5 days a week. And
Nice.
That's another issue with artists. Well, social media, I hear, social media is not my thing. And I'm like, well, then your thing is not going to have anybody hear your music.
I know.
I'm sorry to tell you that. I had no Facebook or Instagram 5 years ago. I don't post personally. It's all for the label. So
cool.
On Mondays.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, on Mondays.
Probably you have probably a better operating system of being a human being than those of us that are, just doom scrolling.
I can't do it. I just
awful.
don't have time for it, which impacts our reach because I'm not on there all day.
Sure.
I will have to say, having Jim's resources available, I think is something that's not afforded to many other people. And we've been able to put some of those resources into some of these projects behind our artists. I don't know exactly how you make money without having maybe that seed money to begin with, or resources and connections.
Yeah.
So yeah, Mondays I always try to do like a show spotlight, like what's a show I think someone should go to. So like last week it was Making Movies, playing at Knuckleheads. I mentioned.
Yeah.
We do a little series at this church, Second Presbyterian, down here at 50. It's right by Axwa. Was at 55th and Brookside Boulevard on Wednesday nights.
Okay.
We're doing a poetry reading tomorrow night with a Glenn North, just an incredible human being. I think the finest poet, one of the finest poets in Kansas City. But then the following week we'll have an artist, Trevor Turla, amazing trombonist, plays with Kadesh. 2 weeks later is jazz, amazing R&B, soul artist. A couple weeks later, Kirsty Lynn, who's like Americana folk. So I try to, again, have some diversity in who we present there.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating. I've mentioned it a couple times on here when Kadesh was on. We're talking about this whole thing of gigging, practicing, rehearsing, recording, writing, all the things that go into traveling, late nights,
making content for your socials ahead of time.
That was the point.
He's a pro.
Well, when he was here, he was like, I just recently have had to teach myself to recalibrate a little bit, to add. I've got to make time, for my digital stuff, my socials, my webs, whatever it is. I've got to have a little spot somewhere in the week, and I got to hit it consistently, and then I can tend to all the other things. So I love, recognizing.
Those are the conversations.
I got to make a change. It can just be 2 millimeters, a shift, and then maybe you're itch and a scratch you couldn't reach before.
I think Ryan Kadesh, I still call him by his birth name, I guess, and then again, like Jaden Xavier from the Black Creatures. Not only do they get it, I think most artists get it, Blair. They get that they need to be active on socials. They just don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not like you're dumb.
No.
But Ryan and Jaden Xavier, not only do they get it, they did it. And so I see it. Like Ryan's figured out I can make money off of YouTube if I'm active, if I'm putting up content there. Sorry to call it content. I hate to use that word, but that is the industry term.
Yeah.
As long as I'm putting up consistent quality content, I'm going to grow numbers.
Yeah.
And I see the same thing with the label socials. Again, we're not crushing it, but by posting every Monday about a show. Today's I do release roundup. So Terry Quinn has a brilliant new EP out. It's freaking phenomenal. It's so good. She's so talented. So I want to tell people about this. She's not working with the label. I don't care if she's working with us formally. I like her record.
Nice.
Make a little post about that. Tag it. Hashtag. If that gets her 2 new listeners, great. Wednesday I try to do something about the industry. Like I'd like to do about Badass.
Sure.
And then Thursday I do like a Throwback Thursday.
Nice.
Because I have so much crap on my phone that needs to go. And then I end up just posting pretty much every day at that point, like, because I went to a show.
Yeah.
Like, I'll post something I filmed from Tweety, I'm sure, on Friday.
So, born and raised here, siblings?
Yep. And my mother just passed about 3 months ago.
Okay.
My father passed about a year ago.
Dang.
So my sister, who's in Orlando, has been coming back. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years. But anyway, she's in Florida. I got another brother, much younger, in Raleigh. And then my youngest brother is here. We're not communicating regularly.
Sure.
But as I mentioned, my mom's twin sister, who also passed away last Thanksgiving.
Dang.
Daughter lives right between us here.
Okay.
And so that's kind of like our closest family here.
Sure.
We're so close. Her son's a year younger
Sure.
than my son. I've got family on my dad's side here too. So,
do you know how mom and dad met?
I'll send you their obituaries, man. I wrote freaking novels for those two.
Did you really?
And I'm a writer. I like to write.
Cool.
I want to tell you about an opportunity after this about creative writing for you in the music industry.
Okay.
They met in college.
Nice.
Yeah, they met at Rockhurst College.
Okay.
And he knew he was going to get drafted, so he signed up for the military, served in Vietnam. I was actually born in Italy, and then he got called to active duty.
Wow.
He served, came back to Kansas City when I was like a year and a half old. Or I think 2 years old, 2.5 years old. And then they lived here the whole time. Well,
Okay.
actually, sorry, they moved to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Sure.
right before I joined the Peace Corps, and that's why when I got out of Kazakhstan, I moved to Raleigh for several years. Loved it out there. But yeah.
Okay, so were they music folks? Were they putting on stuff when you guys were growing up, or?
It's funny because my mother but what happens with Alzheimer's I see in many people, because she was in a residence for almost a decade, is your personality changes. Some people get very angry, confused, frustrated, sad. That's all very understandable, like what's going on with me. Others, like my mom, become very childlike and kind of lose their inhibitions. And so my mother, who was not even, I wouldn't say complaining about my father's constant music playing, suddenly started singing songs, like Frank Sinatra songs.
Oh, wow.
Like Bebop Alula. Would ask me to dance. I'm like, where have you been my whole life? My father, on the other hand, huge music fan, grew up they're both Catholic families, so singing in the church, the way he described it back in the 50s in Oklahoma, you'd have like a hootenanny. So your neighbor would have an acoustic guitar, come to your porch. I'd show up with a pot and a stick or something, and we just sing like folk songs. You'd like everyone learn how to play guitar.
Nice.
Sit around singing Peter, Paul, and Mary or whatever.
Okay.
Rock and roll started to happen.
Yeah.
Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis.
Sure.
Ray Charles. So my dad grew up at that time. Of course, to me, 60s and 70s, he was a student at Rockhurst College when the Beatles did their show at Municipal.
Okay.
You know that famous story
Yeah.
when the tour had ended, and the owner of the A's, Kansas City Athletics at the time, Charles Finley, said, "I'll pay you guys $1 million if you come do a 30-minute set here." And they said, "Okay." So their last show was at Municipal.
We like $1 million.
We'll take it. And whatever year that was, that would have been like 64,
64,
I'm guessing.
okay,
I think he was 20. And he was basically hired with some other rockers students to be security at the shows to basically keep young ladies from jumping over the railings to storm the field to get close to the Beatles.
Wow.
So he experienced that.
Wow.
When he was in Vietnam, what do they call it, like the RX? PX, like where you'd go buy your supplies. You could get cheap things. Well, he got some stereo equipment there. He got a couple things. He got this console that looked like a buffet table. On the sides were the speakers, and then you flipped open the top. It's wooden, and there you had a turntable, and then you had a storage unit for probably, I don't know, 50 records.
That sounds very handsome.
Oh, so cool. So cool. So very 60s. So when he got out of Vietnam, he had that shipped to Kansas City, along with a pair of these like killer like sand. I'm not an audiophile. I'm not into like.
I hear you.
I'll listen off a car radio, whatever.
Yeah.
My phone's fine.
Yeah.
Some killer like Sansui speakers, and so one of my I have a couple young memories. One was probably like 6 or 7. In my stocking for Christmas, I got the 45 of Don McLean's American Pie.
Oh, God.
Which is like, what, a 7-minute song?
I think it's closer to 9.
Yeah. And so half the song's on side A.
Oh, my gosh.
And then right in the middle of like the break, it's going on the... So you got to flip that thing and helter skelter. I forget where it picks up. So I remember that.
Well, yeah.
And then the other memory I have later in life, so I'm like 13, 14, and we had moved to a different house. I remember sitting in the like the empty family room on the floor in front of that console, and just like one at a time, I'd pull out like the Mamas and Papas record where they're all sitting in the bathtub, like California Dreaming. And I mean, I'm in California in my mind. I'm like I was born in 68, but I'm like 1967 Flower Child with Michelle Phillips and Cass Elliot. Like, I want to hang out with you too. Several Beatles records.
What do you want to be when you grow up? In that tub.
John Phillips.
Yeah.
Martin Denny. Not Martin Denny. Denny Phillips. They had original pressings of the Beatles records. He loved like Crosby, Stills and Nash. America was on my first.
Ooh,
a lot of the records I first picked for the show were debut records.
Sure.
Especially self-titled ones. America is a killer record. I mean, it is so good. But I remember second side's not as good.
No,
Side
that's okay though.
Stellar.
Like there will never be another riff written like that little
Ventura
Highway the opening.
Yeah, Jim and I saw them at Voodoo Lounge about 5 years ago, and he kind of scoffed at it. It's probably one of our favorite shows ever.
Oh my gosh.
It was freaking.
I love them.
Their voices are, one guy's passed.
Right.
Just amazing. So yeah, he influenced me. He had a massive cassette collection. Again, when that started to transition, I still have all the old cases he carried him. So there was always music in the car. Never had 8 tracks.
Really?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't do that.
Where is this console now?
Gone. To
Man.
The speakers were
toast.
detached.
Okay.
He actually pulled the turntable out of there and built, like your table, a little mount for it.
Okay.
And he wasn't handy.
But his tapes and whatnot?
I have
live on?
probably about... That's why I picked the Bob James. That's totally my dad's influence. That was one of the first concerts I ever saw. It was Bob James and Earl Klugh, acoustic guitarist, kind of Wes Montgomery, Grant Green vein, a little bit more commercialized. I hate to say that because I think he's a very adventurous guitarist too. But I saw them, was it the fall? I have the concert stub. I think it was the Uptown, probably at age 13.
Wow.
But he had so I have all the Bob James cassettes from my dad. Earl Klugh, he was really into like Weather Report, Chick Corea, and he freaking loved like things like John Denver too. But he definitely kind of got me into jazz.
Grease those wheels
for the smooth side. And I'd say like the last big influence was radio. So you talked about WHB. So back in the day, KY 102 on Sunday nights so I'm like 10, 11, 12, like 6th, 7th grade. You're supposed to be in bed at 10. Sunday nights at 10 o'clock, I think it was the King Biscuit Flower Hour, like 10 to 11, which were live performances. I wasn't really so into that. And you can find all that stuff archived.
Oh, cool.
But from 11 to 12 was the Dr. Demento
Demento,
show.
I knew, yes.
Dude, I think about kids now with their cell phones, hiding from the parents. I would like have all the lights off, under my covers, cheap, crummy, like whatever that. I didn't have a Walkman. I think I was just listening straight to the radio lower, but I did get some like bad, like foamy, and would be singing like Weird Al before he was popular at all. He like the first song was Another One Rides the Bus.
Yes.
Which is also why I picked Queen.
Yeah.
And another comes on, and hey, he's gonna sit by you. I mean, just silly stuff. Fish heads. I just got a love for the radio, and so listening to like golden oldies, on the AM stations. Like you have a pop song from the 50s, 60s, or 70s. I'm losing my memory a little bit these days, but
same.
It totally influenced me.
Yeah.
So.
So was there, and not necessarily from your list, but was there an album in particular that you first fell in love with or acquired to start your own collection? Is any album in particular stand out?
Well, I would say America.
Okay.
I didn't buy that album, but I got their greatest hits.
Yes.
That album is probably half of that album is on their greatest hits, kind of like the Cars.
Right. Yeah.
That was for sure. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. He did not have Deja Vu. He had the one. It's CSN. It's not Young. They're on the boat. It may just be called Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
I think it is.
It has like Just a Song Before I Go. It's probably like 72 later. So I definitely bought their first self-titled and Deja Vu because of that. At that time, I would buy like the greatest hits albums. I wasn't buying the album proper. Yeah. And then later, I was like, well, wait a minute. Those came from this album, and I bet there's some other good songs on there that I don't hear on the radio. Right. And started going down those wormholes. And then kind of like you, I just started to become a completist.
Yeah, same.
I got to get them all from that band. I don't care what it is.
My collection of greatest hits.
Yep.
And a few others that studio records that I intentionally bought. And then it grew, and I was like feeling my pride grow as my and then all of a sudden I was ashamed. Yeah, like, I gotta get rid of all of these, and I gotta get all the studios by all the
Yeah,
And
I keep them too.
Well,
I keep the greatest hits.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while I take a handful up to Exile and get like Fly on the Wall or something.
They let you trade them in. Exile and recycle sets.
Yeah,
and I would say like Fleetwood Mac's, not first two, but two with Lindsay and Stevie, the self-titled and then Rumors. Yeah. And the Eagles, that's totally from my dad. Yeah. Like I'm going to buy that on cassette or CD for myself.
Yeah.
So, for sure.
How about First Show? Or show?
There were a couple. So I feel like First Show was probably that Bob James and Earl Klugh. That would have been like 82 82, my 81, like my 7th grade year. And my dad and mom shared a condominium with like 4 other families in Colorado. And we did like these father-son ski trips.
Yeah.
And so we'd always hear in my dad's car, or our good friends, the Ogren's van, was Bob James. So they all kind of got indoctrinated. So we went to that Bob James and Earl Klugh show. And then in Boy Scouts, that would have been 8th grade year, we went to go see the ZZ Top Eliminator tour.
Oh my God.
With Quiet Riot opening
Wow.
at Kemper. That was probably my first like rock and roll experience. I mean, just copious amounts of weed.
Sure.
I remember, like, you know, our scout leader or whatever, you know, he's with us, the dad. Maybe there were 2 dads and 10 of us teenagers. And this dude in front of us just fires up a freaking hog leg. I have no idea what it is.
Right.
And probably even got secondhand being that close.
Yeah.
So I consider that my first rock one. But again, I didn't choose that.
I love that record like with every fiber in my soul.
Eliminator or
oh, yes.
Quiet Riot?
Well, I mean, that was fun too.
Yeah.
The mask.
Oh, yeah.
With the one eye. But again, in that same pocket, 82 to 85, I have MTV and Legs, and I was like, wait, what? What's going on here? And they
totally capitalized
those
on
girls,
MTV.
They weren't like wearing anything particularly flashy, like a denim jean skirt and a, you know, but I was like, and then like I thought they were cool as shit too, and
they
then
were
the
cool.
car, and so, you know, I was it's funny. I just had a very recent rekindling with that record because one of my, you know, by the time you and I are done and then I do the edit, like by the time I've gone through this conversation twice, I am over it and ready to move. So my favorite, probably my favorite part of the whole process is picking what I'm going to put for intro and outro audio.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't matter if it's under 10 seconds. Like I always get hit with copyright.
Yeah.
No flags to date, but for whatever reason, I had, and it's always really weird how it winds up happening. But I did an interview with a musician, and I had just remembered, which I often do, how much I love the musicianship and the lyrics of TV Dinners, which just it's so simple. Classic. And it shreds.
Yeah. And
that video, it's still creepy and weird, even if it's outdated. But anyway, and then Afterburner comes out, and I'm like, I love what you did with the car being the ship now, kind of Boston third stagey, but you know, some of the slightly softer feel overall and more electronic. And then, you know, Recycler with I'm shuffling through and a couple other, but then even like recent up until Billy's passing, Netflix documentary, they're still touring like madmen.
That's what they've been doing since
and just putting it, and just fucking killing it with 3 of them. I love those guys.
Yeah, I liked that Eliminator record, but looking back on it now, I so prefer their earlier music.
Of course.
Look great.
Of course.
I knew that just from the radio really well. I will say probably the show that I like personally first said I'm going to go to a concert, that would have been end of freshman year or sophomore year in high school. We went to go see Psychedelic Furs and Talk. You know that band?
Yes.
They had a big hit at that time, It's My Life.
Yeah.
And a previous album. But I had really gotten into, like you said, I was moving away from the classic rock and was really getting into what we called at that time new wave. There wasn't even a name for it.
Right.
New wave music, like The Cure, Depeche Mode, New Order, REM. There was no alternative radio at that time. You couldn't find these things. It wasn't on the internet, so you were kind of cool if you knew about somebody like the Psychedelic Furs.
Or if you like frequent Lawrence, you know, kind of get a little bit of it on you and bring something back to, you know.
Right. So those 3 would probably be my first real memories. I saw Ramsey Lewis down at Brush Creek, like high school or something. They had free concerts out there. They would do free shows down at Crown Center on the ice skating rink.
Yes.
Actually saw America there.
Okay.
Saw 3 Dog Night there.
I mean, and
Those are
then
great.
Spirit Fest was around. Like
Dude, I saw Carlos Santana.
We had
high school.
Our city had like a run of like, we're gonna put on free music festivals for our citizens. You know,
They should.
and
all the time.
Like we need
Make
to
money.
revive that,
Liberty Memorial.
right?
They've tried to do it with that Rock Fest or whatever that turns into a mudslide, but again, you just if I were running the city, and I do text the mayor occasionally, who amazingly gets right back to me,
Nice.
about the need to make other businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, aware of how much money a city makes off the music industry. They say for every dollar spent at a show, 50 more cents goes into an ancillary business, whether it's the restaurant you ate dinner at beforehand, whether it's the taxi or Uber driver that brought you down there, whether it's the pack of smokes you bought at the convenience store before the show. For every dollar spent, 50 cents is going into. So
I got to tell you, go ahead.
Take that money.
Yeah.
Make a tourist fund.
Yeah.
Split it up between dance and theater and all the other incredible arts. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like, you should get behind the music, because that's what you claim yourselves as, a music city. But actually, you aren't putting your money, and I don't need money from the city.
Right.
I want the city to help us get KCTV5 to do a weekly segment on all of the killer music that's happening around town.
Sure.
To bring people in.
Yeah. Support the infrastructure. Help it flourish.
Make it a tourist destination, like other cities are doing.
I went to Bluegrass in the Bottoms 4 or 5 years ago with my next door neighbors, and there was a big group of us. We hired this Uber XL, one of the larger ones, and the dude comes to pick us up, and I was like, hey man, if there's a spot that we drive past on the way, I want to grab a pack of Black and Milds. Is that can we? He's like, yeah, of course. And so we get on 71 and we get, we're almost there, and I was like, I guess he just forgot, or just was blowing me off in the first place. But all of a sudden we pull into this gas station. He looks at me and he's like, you want to? I was like, oh yeah, perfect. So I hop out, and I notice as I'm hopping out, he's hopping out, and I'm walking across the parking lot, and he's walking across the parking lot, and I'm like, this is weird. I go in a door, he goes in a door, and I go up to the counter, and as I'm approaching the counter, he goes through a side door to get behind the glass of the counter and comes around to the other side of the glass and goes, what can I get for you, man? I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, hilarious.
It's like he's like a partner in that
Hilarious.
store. Yeah. But
wow.
Anyway.
Making money.
Yeah. So you gave me a fantastic list. Thank you for doing that.
Hard question.
Yeah. I've heard, I've actually had at least one person that was like a firm yes, like bail. Like, I don't want to do that and it's like, what?
If you had to make a list?
Yeah. And so some I've heard it's like choosing your favorite kid. I
just pick 5. Get over it. It's not a big deal. No one's going to hold you to it.
I run myself through the exercise and I was like, oh, easy, no problem. And then I spend 10 seconds and I'm like, maybe it has to be a top 10.
Yeah.
And then another 15 seconds and I'm like, top 20. And eventually you reach a spot where you go, just fuck it. I got to pick
That's
5.
What I do,
and these don't define me, but I love the shit out of them.
Yep.
So
it's perfect.
I was in a funky time crunch situation. I usually like to sit with the cans on to listen to all of the records on your list.
Sure.
Sometimes I've got something comes up and I've got to listen to a portion of one on the road. In which case I'm making jumbled notes at a stoplight in my phone.
Sure.
To remember to write this down and flesh it out.
Sure.
In this particular case, one Bob James, 1974. I had to mow. Like I had just skated by for like 2+ weeks, and like I had a win. I was like, I gotta mow, but I really would rather be starting on Patrick. So anyway, I listened to this record.
Bob James.
While I was cutting the grass.
Okay.
And so, I'm in there's a Zen sort of when you're mowing.
Yeah.
And with music on, it's like a horse of a different feather or whatever he says.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm listening to this record, and unbeknownst to me, because I only like the first time I took my phone out of my pocket, it was already on track 5. And so by the time I finished, here was the thought. That's not the right. Oh, I went out of order. Damn it. That's okay. We'll do a little bit out
So
of it.
in general, you're listening to every track.
I might not stay with the
Got
whole
it.
you know.
I've listened to probably 10 of your episodes. I just didn't know. I didn't know your. I didn't know your whole process
Okay.
exactly. Okay.
You know, there are always going to be artists that present personal challenges.
Yeah.
For me,
Sure.
for example, next week's episode has a record on it that is I just can't.
You're not digging it.
Just can't
Yeah.
and won't, to be honest. Like I've got, and it's not one that's available streaming. So the only way I could find it was full YouTube, and so I don't even have like track distinction, you know. So I'm kind of just scooting forward, and every time I scoot, it's still just the same, and I'm like, fuck, man,
not working. That's okay.
Anyway, more on that in a minute. So I'm thinking to myself, man, that first track on that Bob James record had me real that, you know, in my mind I'm thinking 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that had me and then track 2 was pretty cool. Track 3 was really cool.
Yeah.
And then so by the time I'm done and showered and like I'm like, oh shit, that was a 9.5 minute opener. Like that was all one song, and then we moved into different. But I never heard of this guy before. Before you gave me your list,
that's why I picked him.
Third of 50 records.
Yeah.
6 tracks, 34 minutes. A Christmas Baby from Marshall, Missouri.
Yes.
Which I may or may not have been inside the courthouse of that fine town on an occasion.
I think he's got a vineyard there.
Does he really?
He's got a vineyard somewhere in Missouri.
Okay. So 20 plus folks credited. I mean, to me, it sounds like, you know, 3 to 5, 3 for most tracks, and then 2 guest features. You know, but there's a lot of folks on it.
Yeah.
This came from Dad. Because he had all his cassettes, he said, I believe.
Again, I don't know which was my entry point. It was probably Bob James 3.
Okay.
And I should try to... I know we talked about it off air. As I thought about records, really, to me, the definition of a great record, a truly great record, is from start to finish. There isn't any filler. I'm not saying every song is like the best ever. There's also a method to the madness. Like the track listing is super important to me. Whether it's 2 songs back to back that are mellow, have an up tempo, or different instrumentation, like that. That's, and especially with the label now, thinking and listening to artists about their process, because sometimes we disagree. Well, I think that should be the album opener. That should be the first single.
Of course.
And we don't agree, and that's fine.
Yeah.
In general, we've never told an artist what to do. We certainly will push back and say, I don't think that's going to be the right decision, but if you want to make money.
Right.
But anyway, I think that there are other records of Bob's that had like the more recognizable songs of his that maybe you would have heard. But for me, it felt important just like start to finish. And I'm also trying to remember, he started to work with Creed Taylor. So Creed Taylor had worked with Verve, and put out like some of the most important jazz works ever, before starting his own label, which I think is CTI. I had notes, which I had notes and didn't bring them. I thought they were on my phone, but I realized no, I didn't bring them. But I just thought it was such a statement for him to come out with that, again, opening track, Without the Shadows. Like, that was not going to be commercially successful. 3-minute song, 3-minute song.
That's my opener.
I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And then Bob James, I wouldn't say he'd been a sideman, but he had contributed to countless other artists' records where once you start listening to his music, you're going to hear him on a Grover Washington record or something like that's got to be Bob James.
That list of 50 is like stuff that's listed as Bob James. There's a whole other 2 or 3 other lists of where he features.
So I don't know that my dad certainly has this, and I have his cassette now. I don't think this was the first one I heard, and maybe it's not even necessarily the one that got me. I just felt for your program, this was the one. It also had the cover, Feel Like Making Love, which I think he does a very interesting version of. It also has a cover, Night on Bald Mountain, which is basically like classical. Who is that composer? And it's just trippy as hell. It's that da 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 da. He was really involved in like that. What is that song? Zachsperson? It's not 2001 Space Odyssey.
Also Sprach Zarathustra.
Thank goodness you can pronounce it much better than I could possibly. My point is, he was showing a lot of his influences by taking this classical, traditional jazz, and actually what I learned about Bob James is he was actually like an avant-garde, like bebop pianist when he started. He started with like Sarah Vaughan.
Okay.
And then he became most well known for basically inventing smooth jazz, in my opinion, with someone like Earl Klugh. Maybe you could argue David Sanborn a little bit later, like the Crusaders, stuff I'm not really that into.
Right.
But for me, Bob James, with a couple of these songs too, he was my entry point later into hip hop.
Oh, a lot of talk about influence and maybe some samples and.
Yeah, if you Google like what, and I know we're talking about this record, but if you Google like what are the top 10, 50 most sampled songs, I believe he's got 3 in the top 10. And
not bad.
And you'd never in the top 10.
Hall of Fame.
So like, let me just think of one that everyone will know real fast. LL Cool J uses it. Run DMC uses it on It's Tricky. It's those steel drums. Back to the steel drummer at Flying Horse Tap Room.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. That's Bob James' version of Take Me to the Mardi Gras.
Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Which is a groovy, like smooth jazz, but it also has that beat. And then the other one, Nautilus. Like, I just cannot tell you how many songs that's been sampled in. So later in college, high school, after Beastie Boys, but around De La Soul time in college, I'd hear these hip hop songs and be like, that's freaking Bob James. That's the nerdy guy my dad made me listen to back in the day with the Boy Scouts, you know? And now I'm realizing, like, holy cow, these DJs, these hip hop groups respected him. And I've always thought about hip hop as, because originally, and maybe still, a lot of people say, oh, they're stealing. You know, it's theft. They're taking the other artist's work. And I'm like,
or it's homage.
I look at it as poetry.
Okay.
It's exactly what it is to me. They're taking a piece, whether it's the instrumentation or the lyrics or whatever, and they're repurposing it to meet their vision.
I've got...
what are you looking for?
4 or 5 mini spiral notebooks full of poetry.
Yeah.
That I've written.
Yeah.
That, whatever, maybe someday I'll do something with. But, I mean, I know... and it's across a small handful of years, but I am dipping in and out of, like, or I should say, I'm writing all original stuff, but I am peppering my lines with snippets of words and phrases from other writers.
Sure you are.
That, like, maybe 1 in 1,000 people would go, oh,
yeah,
that's a catchy little J.D. Salinger line, or that's, you know, whatever. Like, I think, to me, it works great. I like doing that.
It.
I'm not, I didn't write that thinking if I include, you know, this LL Cool J 6-word bar, that's going to springboard me into publication and wealth.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying, like, I love the way this dude wrote or this gal wrote, and I want to I'm going to mix up my own words, make it a little less vanilla, and homage, you know?
And it's important to you, right? Again,
yes.
I think that's important for each artist.
Yeah.
What is the intent here? Are you wanting to get out in the public and sing a song? Are you wanting to create for yourself?
Right.
And you mentioned, you know, again, that De La Soul 3 Feet High and Rising recently being, you know, put out on Digital Forces streaming services. I feel like between that record and Beastie Boys' second, Paul's Boutique, just the breadth and diversity of the samples they were pulling, like just stuff you would never imagine.
No.
Some of it you recognized at the time, but it really more so over the years. You'd be into some random place and the original song would come on. You're like I just discovered a song like 3 weeks ago that had a Bob James sample. I'm like, I've listened to that a million times. I never caught that.
Right.
Like, wow. How did those guys know about him?
I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but where I sort of came online with it was Digital Underground Sex Packets. And it was like,
that was on my list, but I picked Public Enemy. And
oh, nice.
I love that band.
I was like, I don't understand. Like, I listened to that thing over and over and over again with the liner notes, and I was so confused as to, okay, so these are the guys in the band, but like, why are they saying shit about Bootsy Collins and George Clooney? Like, I don't understand. Yeah. Like, are they in the room? Are they part of the? And then I was like, as I grew older and I'm hearing like some older funk and all, I'm like, oh, ooh,
yeah,
I like that.
Well, what's the one they take Flashlight from almost directly?
Yep.
I was just talking to a friend about that record the other day. Of course, Freaks in the Industry is one of the few songs I can still almost do word for word. Brilliant. The one that really got me, we were talking about this Gutfest 89. And it's like the intro is like they're at some faux rock
There's
show.
two girls, they're lying in a cage and naked. It's crazy.
We've got The Who.
Yeah.
Herbie Hancock's up next. I'm like, these guys at Gutfest 89.
Yeah.
That's genius to me. And in no way is that theft. And I get why, the Turtles don't want De La Soul to use that song.
Sure.
I get it.
Sure.
Damn, but come on.
Yeah.
They're bringing you more ears to your art. They're not stealing your... Okay, that's a whole other conversation. I'm trying to pull up this Bob James record, and I'm not...
Well, I could, if you ever want to put out some content with two middle-aged white guys embarrassing themselves, I could probably go toe-to-toe with you on Freaks of the Industry.
Oh, money, B.
So, like I said, I went out of order of release date. So.
Oh, that's fine. And I actually, when I first did them, I put them in order, but then I'm like, whatever.
Right. So.
Hey, and by the way, everybody, if you're listening, seriously, dig deep into Bob James. Do what I'm doing. Google most sampled songs ever. This guy comes back to Kansas City not often enough, and it's a crime we don't recognize him as a Missouri born and bred.
Right.
I mean, he is. I saw him in Tokyo with my wife about a year before we moved back here, so that would have been 2004. The Blue Note, Yokohama. There's a Blue Note Tokyo and a Blue Note. I mean, they have them around the country.
Right.
It was Bob James. It was, I would say, an avant-garde saxophonist, and it was a turntablist, DJ Swift.
Cool.
He comes out wearing like a Hawaiian shirt. He's got to be 70 or something at that time. He's not that old, maybe 60. I so am desperate to have a recording of that night. It was like the most incredible.
That sounds awesome.
So he was playing some of his songs, but completely revamped version. I mean, it was creating music. It was improvisation at its finest with a turntablist.
Wow.
And then I saw him most recently. There was a great program here called 12 O'Clock Jump that has now been discontinued. I'm pretty sure they recorded it in several venues around Kansas City. Where was that? Anyway, he came and played a traditional piano set and had a Q&A with the audience and got to talk with him a little bit afterwards and recounted that story about Japan. Could not be a more humble human being. I mean, this guy's played with everybody. He must have a 50, like I said, Sarah Vaughan.
Wow.
And still creating.
Cool.
Just beautiful. So if you haven't heard any of his music, you got to go hear about James.
That's it for me. I've never listened to anything else by him, but that I really enjoyed that, and such a wild experience to sort of come to post Mo and be like 6-track, what? Oh, yeah. I love. This is my opener. This is my format. This is my content.
Yeah.
It's my record.
It was usually about 3 songs a side.
Okay.
A couple long ones.
Oh, nice.
And a little short and sweet one.
Well, that was 1974, so we're going to skip a decade back to 64 with a Verve release. It's Getz Gilberto. Stan Getz and
Joa Gilberto.
Pronounce the first name for me again.
Again, my Portuguese isn't great, but I think that's right. Joa.
Yes.
Joa Gilberto.
Okay. 8 tracks, 33 minutes, 3 frickin' Grammys.
Yeah.
Probably, I know there are more covers or more renditions of Girl from Ipanema,
of course,
out there,
but
I think this is the first one I ever heard.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like maybe somebody was trying to turn me onto these cats or this record, but wherever I've ventured rendition or cover wise of it since then, this is always home base for me.
Yeah.
And I think they wrote it, right? Okay. So massive discography for Getz, pretty large one for Gilberto. How'd this one land in your lap?
I got turned on to this when I was in Kazakhstan. So again, when we went over there, I think we were allowed like 2 bags of 20 kilograms each.
Okay.
So like 45 pounds.
Sure.
And a carry-on.
Nice.
And you're going to go live there for 2 years. So, you probably want to take some clothes and some toiletries. You couldn't get stuff. I had 1 bag that was cassettes. 250 cassettes. Didn't even have a player. I never really even owned a Walkman in my life. I don't know how I was planning to play those.
Figure it out when you get there, man.
Fortunately, in the group of 50 volunteers, there were actually 4 from the Kansas City area, which is amazing. From all over the country, there were 4. One of those guys, a great friend of mine, Ken Luckett, also brought a bag of about 200 CDs. And then there was another guy from Colorado that had snowboard and a bag of about 200 cassettes.
Nice.
Like my friend Ken was like blues, jazz, not so much rock and roll, and then my other friend was more like Dead Kennedys.
Oh wow.
Punk, replacement stuff I was really into. So what did we do? We all traded cassettes.
Of course.
And we immediately bought
A
crappy
device.
but decent,
Yeah.
nice one we could spend our no Peace Corps money on, dual cassette deck.
Yeah.
And we just started burning shit. Tried not to curse today for the kids. But anyway, Ken had this, and then another young lady that I loved over there had this, and I just went crazy. Again, from start to finish. Antonio Carlos Jobim is probably considered the godfather of bossa nova, along with, I would say, João Gilberto. Jobim was a pianist, a composer, and has just an amazing discography himself. I mean, I could spend days talking about him. But Gilberto was different for me because he had this very different sound, and I could tell you like his whole life story, but basically he had all this talent, and apparently he was a prodigious pot smoker in Brazil back in the day, and was like just too lazy to show up for gigs.
Oh boy.
And so he kind of got shunned for a while.
Oh boy.
And he spent a year or 2 sort of in seclusion, and he developed this strumming style and delicate singing style where he was like so soft.
Yeah.
You had to strain your ear to hear him.
But it still sounds great.
Like he'd sit in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so he develops a style, right? And then he gets to gigging again. And so those 2 sort of created this new sound, bossa nova. It was a time of great change in Brazil, economic prosperity, some non-military dictators running the country for the first time. We imagine these beautiful beaches and stuff like that. And so Stan Getz, who already had been playing probably a decade and a half, if not 2 decades before that, realizes, hey, these guys are good, and I can see this becoming sort of a trend. And so I'm going to sit down with them and record this record. And many other, Stan Getz partnered with a lot of other Brazilian artists. I'm also a huge fan of Brazilian music outside of bossa nova. I did a show at Mark Manning a few months ago. I was like a guest DJ, and I just did international music. I talked all day about the different regional styles of music.
Sure.
But anyway, the story goes for that girl of Ipanema was, for whatever reason, it wasn't working with Joa singing it. Some of it's instrumental. Right? And so they get Astrid Gilberto, Joa's first wife, who knew a little, they wanted to have a song in English, with some English, to have some crossover in the States.
Right.
To sing that. Well,
and she's got
looking back on it now,
beautiful voice too.
Freaking brilliant. Oh yeah. And really complimented his soft style too, even though she wasn't a traditional singer.
No.
And she went on to a career, and I love her music. They split. He remarried. His daughter, Bebel Gilberto, I mean, amazing family. This record changed my life just in the fact that it was so soft. I mean, again, it was like that Mama's, it made me want to go to Brazil.
Yeah, like I gotta say, like, of course his playing style is beautiful.
Yeah.
Getz's work is beautiful, the vocal, but I don't know if it's the production or the way, but even the way the sound of his fingers moving up and down the strings in between the notes is like a different instrument, like, and it works, and I love it, and it's gorgeous.
And it may be Creed Taylor from Verve who produced this.
Okay.
I don't know. We talked about Bob James before.
Yeah.
I had my notes. That's
That's
embarrassing.
okay.
I was going to mention a couple more things too. So many songs from this are now just jazz standards outside
Yes.
of Bossa Nova. So desafinado,
Mm-hmm.
which means off key, and then think like Dave Brubeck, Take 5. They're experimenting with some different time signatures, kind of groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And then the other big one that you hear all the time is Corcovado, which translates as Quiet Nights of Quiet Stars.
Right.
And Corcovado is the name of that peak, like the humpback peak where that big old statue of Jesus is at.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some interesting history behind the record. My wife and I, again, had the unbelievable privilege of seeing Joe Gilberto in like 2004 when we were in Japan. I don't even know how I found these tickets. He rarely travels. He just passed recently, 2 years ago.
Did he really? Okay. All I remember seeing is that he split with her, and then at one point she maybe hooked up with Getz, who I don't think was very cool to her.
Yeah, he had a lot of relationships.
A
The little bit I know about
but it seemed like there was a lot of infidelity kind of
Yeah.
floating in and out of things. Whatever.
Different time.
Yep.
But anyway, we had a chance to see him. So I'm got to believe he was probably in his late 70s, not 80. It was this massive music hall in Tokyo. I think it was 10,000 seats. We were up top, not the worst seats, but not the best in the middle. And I'll just never forget this. Besides the fact that the acoustics in this place were just phenomenal. I mean, it'd be like the Kauffman Center on steroids.
Oh, wow.
That good. People in general in Japan are pretty reserved and quiet, but he comes out. There is thunderous applause, right? And he's literally like hobbling out there, carrying his guitar, sits down at the, I can't remember if it was a stool or a chair. And they've recorded this. You can buy this album.
Oh, cool.
And proceeds to play for like an hour and a half straight. So quiet. Quiet nights, quiet stars. Total silence. No applause. He just runs one into the other. He stops. He puts his head down. And I swear to God, for 15 minutes, I thought he was dead. Like, I thought he had like exhausted himself and killed. He didn't move. He's just got his head down. And people are just going batshit crazy.
Wow. Where?
Tokyo.
Okay.
10,000 seat hall. At whatever point, 15 minutes, it seemed like it was an hour. He raises his head. It's total silence again in the place.
Jeez.
Like pin drop silence.
Yeah.
And he launches into another hour. Most incredible, one of the most incredible concerts experiences.
Brazilian music in Japan.
They're huge fans.
Well,
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. I mean,
but I mean, it's just genre doesn't necessarily have to go in its country of origin or its culture of origin.
think about like everywhere besides America, and I realized this when I lived in Kazakhstan. We don't really bring in international music here, right? We want to hear things in English. Now, we have country, and we got jazz, and we got hip-hop, and all these things, but in general, when you turn on the radio, it's in English.
Yeah.
So we're not listening to a French singer.
Mm-mm.
We're not listening to a song in, maybe in Spanish these days, kinda, but still no.
Kinda.
If you're an island in Japan, or you're a closed country, or my wife's from Korea, same thing, kinda. Well, everything's from outside of your country. I mean, there are Japanese artists, don't get me wrong, in Korea, and you've seen the explosion in the last 20 years, but my point is, they don't differentiate between an ABBA song from Sweden and a song by Elvis Presley in America.
Wow.
And a song from Joe Gilberto. They're pulling it all. You would be a kid in a candy store and record stores over there.
I bet.
I mean, days. They love CDs. All their CDs come with like the most incredible packaging, all the lyrics, and like a 20-page booklet in Japanese that goes all this geeky stuff we're talking about.
Wow.
I have so many CDs from Japan that are like this thick, the liner notes, and cheap, like $2 used.
Huh.
I mean, I brought back, I think, 500 CDs alone.
Wow.
It's out of control. So, yeah. And then they have stuff that we can't find here. They have stuff that's imported. They have the original Portuguese Brazilian version imprint, which you'd pay like $50 in the States for.
I'm gonna have to. You should. I can't remember the name. It's somewhere in the late 30s, early 40s, episode wise. And the guy's name is Tomaski. He did an episode, and he had a cut. He's lived in Brazil for several chunks of years, so he had a couple of at least one Brazilian artists on his list. And anyway,
Again, I had originally picked Queen the Game, which is personally just a massive influence on me from 8th grade, but I just figured I wanted to get a little international. Most of the music I listen to these days, it's international.
okay, cool.
To be honest, probably
Very cool.
80%.
Nice.
I don't care what country.
Very nice. You said there were a couple more things you wanted to say about that record. Did we
That's
cover
it. Just,
okay.
you can't go wrong with any
It's gorgeous.
Jobim,
Yeah.
Gilberto. I'm not as big of a Stan Getz fan, actually. I mean, I love him.
I-
But those other two, you can't go wrong with
I
any.
found that I was very much into what he was playing on the opener, and then by the near the end of the record, I was like, more Gilberto, please.
Yeah.
But just me. I mean,
But again, across the breadth of all his releases, Stan Getz, I mean, he plays with so many different
Right.
people. It's kind of hard.
Right.
You hear his sound, kind of like Dave Brubeck, or Paul Desmond from Dave Brubeck, but he's versatile.
Yes.
So don't give up on him.
right. Well, I want to move to number 3, but I got to
Okay.
pee and take 5.
Yeah,
real
you wanna
quick.
stop?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So
you keep me on a timeline, and
Yeah,
I'll try
no,
to
we're
limit
good.
the side.
All right, now we're back to the chronological release order. So we mistakenly started in 74, went backwards to 64. Now we're going forwards again. 1978, self-titled release, first of 7, The Cars. 9 tracks, 35 minutes. We talked briefly before we were rolling about the track listing and how most tracks on this record are very well known by anybody who has spent any time in the classic rock camp.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal record, really. Tell me about your introduction to this one / love of it, why it makes your list, etc.
I'm sure I heard it on KY over the years. What was our year again? I feel like it was 79.
78, yeah.
Okay, I would have guessed, 78. I'm sure I heard it on 102, and then when the Fox came aboard, late 80s or something, heavy rotation. I consider them, a new wave band. They probably don't fall into that
Pop
like
rock.
Devo, but just classic power pop, like coming out of something like the Raspberries. Again, listening to a lot of AM radio. I think that first track, Good Times Roll, sets the tone from the start like an out. They are literally rolling into the record.
Yeah.
Very clever. And some of these probably have higher like chart rankings and accolades like that. Like Just What I Needed. I personally think that may be top 5 songs ever. That song will never get
Just What I Needed?
I don't mind you coming.
Right.
Yeah. Just
Wasting all
that
my
bass line, the
time.
drums. But then, you've got it sandwiched in there with My Best Friend's Girl. It's a nice transition, kind of like that Queen record, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Also, I am thinking of this in the traditional vinyl sense where there is a start to side A and an end to side A. So You're All I've Got Tonight picks up on side B, rolling into Bye Bye Love. And of course, I never really watched Fast Times until maybe college. But moving in stereo,
That Phoebe scene.
it just opens up your senses to you are like floating with her. That's again the power of the visual with MTV that they hadn't quite capitalized on, but would later with like Heartbeat City you mentioned, which to me is a little poppy.
Yeah.
I just think it's a brilliant record. If you look at the track lengths, like there we talked about Bob James, everything's under 4. Side 2, interesting. All songs are just over 4, so I feel like they kind of went for the radio. I don't know if Rico Kasich was thinking about that,
He was thinking about being naked with Paulina Porskova.
or
maybe.
anybody,
Right?
I'm sure. Interestingly enough, right before the pandemic, 2019, Todd Rundgren did a show at Liberty Hall that Jim actually got VIP tickets for, and one of the members of his band was Benjamin Orr, who I did not recognize. I think all of them were incredible instrumentalists. I love the songwriting structure. The lyrics are relatable.
Yep.
I mean, the album cover is so iconic. You just want to be in the car with her or going wherever the hell she's going.
Yeah. I guess they had a different idea for the album art, and somebody designed it, and there was this whole bit about how he remembered it cost exactly $80, and he was thrilled with it, and then they went with that instead, and I guess a couple or all the members grew to hate that.
This one.
Yeah, because just look, that smile, the girl looking back at you every time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, Candy O, I think, was the one before that had like Since You're Gone was the big hit, but that's also an interesting it's a woman and she's
Yeah.
kind of like sketched and kind of
Yep.
this, they were smart about that. I think
Yeah.
they were one of the first groups pre MTV to really kind of capitalize on that or play
Sure.
off of that. Iconic band. Wish I had seen them. Had a chance.
Did Rick just recently pass here?
Did he?
I thought.
He always looked like he was,
was
on the
an
verge
interesting
of like
looking
wasting
dude.
away.
Yeah.
He weighed like 10 pounds, 6 foot, whatever.
Always the shades and the sort of brunette version of Rod Stewart hair.
Yeah. Again, that really is the only album for me. There's some songs on other records that I get into, but from start to finish, I just don't think you're really going to find a better record. When you look at those years, sometimes when you, like I mentioned, my dad passed away recently, and I made like a Spotify playlist for his celebration of life, like my mom, and I just Googled like top 10 hits of 1944, like what was he listening to when he was 12. I gotta believe that for 78, this was one of those records that was just ubiquitous.
Sure.
It was just
September
everywhere.
15th, 2019.
Oh, when he passed?
Yeah, and he was still married to Paulina.
Wow.
Yeah. He was married twice before that.
And oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Huh?
Suzanne from 71 to 88.
Okay.
Constance from 63 to 71. So couple good runs, and then Paulina for till the end.
Okay.
I mean, R.I.P. in peace, as my buddy Ethan likes to say.
Well, and we were talking about Joe Gilberto too. I think that the pandemic, a lot of people have passed. And even with my parents' case, like we aren't aware of it as much just because things have kind of been shut down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that would be notable for me that Rick Ocasek passed, and I didn't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so if this is the best Cars record, true or false, Drive is the best Cars song of all time.
Dude. No offense to anyone out there. I'm a big karaoke fan here in the States and then abroad. As I mentioned, if I had a music center, it would be heavily featured because in Japan, it's not like America where you like sign up for a song and wait all night. No, you rent a room and you and 4 or 5 of your closest friends go together and order pizza or have a soda pop and everybody sings.
Cool.
It's your turn.
Yeah.
That song, Who's Gonna Drive You Home, or Drive technically, we used to go to this karaoke place, Jay Barleycorns, which was like a converted Pizza Hut over there off of like, it's over there by Shawnee Mission West. And there was this dude every Friday, and we were there every Friday. He would do this like, Who's Gonna Drive You Home?
Oh, no.
Killed that song for me.
No.
I
Okay.
can't say I was a huge fan before.
Oh, I absolutely. I mean,
oh, God, so bad.
just the synth stuff.
Yeah,
and
I'm with that.
Lyrically, it's gorgeous.
I'm with that.
I have always loved Rick's voice. Actually, does the blonde dude sing that one, or does Rick?
Is
sing
that Benjamin Orr?
Maybe. Either way. Obviously, a huge departure from most everything else they did. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's still freaking beautiful, man. I love that tune. I didn't have that experience.
This guy, we have made fun of this dude, whatever his name is. Guy, I hope he's still alive. He was so into it.
No.
But I'm like, dude, that's bad.
Yeah.
You just ruined my night.
Wow.
Sorry.
So a short leap from 78 to 80. Wild Planets. B-52s.
Yeah.
Second record of 7, 9 tracks, 34 minutes. Talk to me about these guys.
I was not into, their hit Rock Lobster off their first record, which was probably my first exposure to the band. High school. Again,
Sure.
we were called the New Wave Honeys at Rockers because my group of friends, we didn't listen to I listened to classic rock and I loved it. I just wanted to listen to music. So I heard that song, and it's just kind of kitschy. I didn't get it. And then when I got to college, probably 88, so the year is, only 8 years since the album was released, I got into Wild Planet, Whammy. They had an EP called Mesopotamia. I want to say David Byrne produced that. I feel like that string of records, their self-titled debut, Wild Planet, Whammy, and Mesopotamia, those albums changed my life. I mean, I listened to those from start to finish just constantly, and the other guys that I hung out with at that time.
Wow.
They were fun. The look, I think, was very important. They had the bouffant hairdos and stuff.
Big stage presence.
I wouldn't even say naive, just being unaware of the gay community. I didn't really associate that with Fred Schneider until the album that came out when I was in college that year, Cosmic Thing, which had their huge hits like Love Shack, like commercial radio hits. Again, very smart about MTV. They played that up. I feel like those first 4 records, from start to finish, I could have picked any one of them.
Oh, wow.
Equally.
Okay.
I looked at their first record. I felt like the second half wasn't as strong. Party Out of Bounds just kind of gets the tempo set there from around, switching between Fred's lyrics versus the sisters' lyrics was also learning about the tragedy of their brother passing. There was just a lot of like nerdiness, and I want to find out about them. Plus, maybe the cherry on the top, when I learned that they were from Athens, Georgia. At that time, so maybe we're 88, 89, I think there was a documentary called Athens, GA, and it featured REM doing, they did a cover of the Everly Brothers' Dream on there that I personally think is still one of their best songs ever.
Cool.
Groups like Pylon, who had a resurgence about 3 years ago. It just kind of documented the scene, going back to community versus industry, in this college town, like Lawrence that I was in.
Yep.
And I felt like, I want to go to Athens.
Yeah.
I want to find out where all this and different musical styles too.
Yeah.
It wasn't like just one thing. And I was like, it kind of got me listening to college radio a lot.
Cool.
Because again, this probably wasn't on, I can't think of one song here that was on traditional radio or commercial radio, but college radio, KJHK and Lawrence, oh God, it was B-52s all the time.
Sure.
Those other bands, REM, Pylon, for example. Moving to Raleigh, I got into Southern bands from North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, certainly Georgia. I just felt they sort of epitomized the geography, the time period, the fashion sense. It's cool these days, on YouTube you can just find so many. You can just go down wormholes, as you know, forever. Old footage of some of these bands playing in just random places, doing these live performances. And I saw one recently of them doing Private Idaho. The last song on record, vinyl, side A. Oh my God. It's a poppy song on the record, but live, it was edgy. It was nervy.
Sure.
It was like Talking Heads. It was like Jonathan Richman. I felt some Velvet Underground in there. Which again, any Velvet Underground or Jonathan Richman for that matter. I'm sold.
Right.
And then I had a chance to see them twice in a 3-month span when that Cosmic Thing came out. Once was in Kansas City. Was that Municipal? I have that ticket stub too. I don't know if you keep your ticket stubs.
I do.
Highly. And it makes me sad these days when you get these e-tickets and things. I still print them out and cut them.
I know.
It's not the same thing as like GA, seat whatever, $2. So I have actually like special ticket books for that. But I saw them here in Kansas City. Can't remember where that was. And then 2 months later after that show, one of the gals we went with said, hey, my brother lives in Normal, Illinois at whatever Eastern Illinois University is there. And they're going to do another show there. Let's go. Those were back in the days when you just get in your car and drive 4, 6, 8 hours to, you don't even know where this town is, middle of nowhere, to go see your favorite band.
Where are you guys staying tonight? Don't know yet.
No. That was the conversation
we have some
at about
smokes.
1 o'clock in the morning.
We have a little bit of bud.
Yeah. What
Full
are you
tank
doing
of gas.
tonight?
Yeah.
We got here. I don't really want to drive back to Kansas or Lawrence.
Yeah.
But my point is, they did these old songs, my first time to see them live, and I felt like, even though it had been, 8 years since they were released, I still felt that same kind of energy.
Cool.
And then later they got more poppy and commercial and did what a lot of bands do.
Well, they were probably an outfit that wasn't same set list every night. They were probably mixing
perhaps.
it up. Yeah. I mean, because if you're keeping it fresh and mix it, like you're not like I just used this example in the last episode, but Night Ranger going to the Ozarks and just dreading. You got to play Sister Christian before the evenings.
Don't tell me you love me.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Dude, that's another one, motoring. But back to that last point, though, I think they were the first time I realized bands do this for a living. Because I remember looking, they were in Kansas City. Now they're going to Denver. They went West Coast, but now they're circling back and they're getting back to Illinois. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, they've been on the road
they're
for
still on the road,
3 months now.
Yeah.
I mean, grinding.
Yeah.
And, again,
you mentioned REM. They had their manager, they dropped out. of school in Athens, and their manager was driving around in some blue van, and they had like a $2 a day per diem for food a piece. But hey, we're in this. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're in this band. We're on the road. We're gigging.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
For me, Blair, that's still the only way to do it as an artist. You just simply have to get out. And I don't know that I could do that. It's not for everyone.
Right.
But if you think people are going to notice you, I think about Radkey. Great. I call them Kansas City, but I believe it's St. Joe where they're from. You just get out there so much that people can't help but notice you. And if it's someone who happens to be in a higher spot because of their experience or, I don't know, skills, that sees what you have to offer and embraces you and then wants to take you out, then you just kind of become the next step of that mentorship is what I'd call it.
And the same sort of structural thing is in place with stand-up comics.
Oh, I believe
if
Huge now.
You're emceeing or hosting, and then you've got 3.5 minutes of material. Eventually, now you've got 10. Now you've got 15. And then you're out there gigging and putting in the work, and then someday somebody's like, "Dude, you should, whenever you have 20 minutes, I'd like you to open for me."
Right.
And it just keeps. And then all of a sudden, you're in a spot where you're like, "Dude, I saw you the other night. Your 5-minute set was killer. You want to open for me?" And it's just sort of this giving back, revolving kind of. Anyway,
I believe it's better than any PR you can pay for. And
absolutely.
I don't necessarily believe in lucky breaks. I believe in you just make your own break because you're so active and productive, and people
luck
just
finds a way to sprinkle itself in here and there.
Yeah,
but you're the one churning out the.
Yeah, people can't help but notice you because you're just active.
Yeah. Well,
killer record, get them all. Like I said, the first 4, Cosmic Thing, I started to check out a little bit. It's kind of poppy, and then
I remember the first time I heard them. And then heard them again, and then heard them again. I was like, wait, this isn't a joke? Like, these guys are for real? And then it's like, it's not just Rock Lobster and Love Shack. It's
100%.
A whole
100%.
thing for you. You want to lift the cover and look on you'll get lost before you come out the other side.
And you're so right. Like, I felt like Rock Lobster was kitschy, and maybe that was intentional. But then when I dig in and see like a video of private, like, you guys were cutting edge.
Yeah.
You were really pushing the envelope. And even on like Cosmic Thing, they started talking about like women empowerment, like housework. I don't need a man to make me clean.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't need a man to do this. I need a man to help me clean. So they were saying something. On the surface, it seemed poppy and silly, but no, they were substantial.
Well, perhaps the perfect segue. You mentioned cutting edge and pushing the envelope. 1988 takes a nation a million to hold us back. Public Enemy, 2 of 15 for them. I didn't realize they had put
prolific
out
and still putting out great
16
things.
tracks, 57 minutes. Rolling Stone called it a Molotov cocktail of nuclear scratching, gnarly minimalist electronics and revolution rhyme, which I thought was that's pretty fitting. In my exile Peaches soundware, like they were on. I don't remember how they hit my radar, but I got Yo Bum Rush the Show.
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't get it. Like
it's a little harder.
This is kind of the acme '88 of the explosion of rap and hip hop, and like I felt like I never heard of rap before, and then I woke up one morning and there was 150 artists to choose from.
Yeah,
and you mentioned some time in Oaktown. I loved Too Short. I loved NWA and Eazy-E, and went a bunch of different directions, but. I kind of checked out. Like, by the time I would listen to this and the 2 that came after it was, it was way, they were, I was behind.
Fear of a Black Planet.
Fear of a Black Planet, and then Apocalypse, 91.
Fantastic record.
So, Flavor Flav was always, at least for this one and for Yo Bum Rush's Show, like, very odd juxtaposition to put him next to Chuck D, and Chuck D is like abrasive and in your face, and he's serious about making music, but he's serious about social issues and equality and all these things. And then Flavor Flav is just a lot, yeah, boy, all of his wearing the clock. And it was like, I remember a time where I was like, wow, Flavor Flav sure was a goofball back then. And then he was on reality TV, and I was like, oh, we haven't even seen the goofball outfit come out yet.
Right.
Like, wow.
Right.
But how'd you cross paths with this one?
It's interesting you brought up that Yo Bum Rush the Show, because I think my first exposure to hip hop was probably Beastie Boys' License to Ill, which I did not care for at that time. That was probably my sophomore, junior year in high school. Party for Your... I know Travis Kelce. I don't like that song.
Yeah, it's whatever.
I don't like that song.
Strange that the last track on this is...
And they're interesting about that. I'll get to that in a sec.
Okay.
But I didn't care for that Beastie Boys song. And a lot of that hip-hop that I heard at that time... Actually, I bought that at Peaches. I bought the cassette for Run DMC's King of Rock, which is the one before... the one where they broke through, and that name's escaping me. But it's just kind of formulaic. It's the same... mechanized drum beat sound, and there's a method to that. There's a style they're doing, but it's just kind of it's not organic. It's not really speaking to me.
Nope, not catchy.
And so I heard that Yo Bum Rush the Show at some point. I'm like, whatever. And then when this came out, I'm junior year in college, and I'm starting to listen to more hip hop, like De La Soul.
Yep.
I'm really into like. What was the name of their group? Native Tongues.
Native Tongues.
Yeah. I was really into like intelligent lyrics, clever samples, things that catch me off guard. Definitely, I got into NWA, but I was definitely not into that side as much. But what struck me about this was, as you mentioned first, again, the juxtaposition between Chuck and Flavor, and I can talk about that, but the thoughtfulness, like the countdown to Armageddon. I realized again years later that's a Kool and the Gang sample that they're pulling. It took me like forever to know that, but it sounds familiar, like something I've heard. Kind of like the spoken word. It sounds like we're in a show. It's the British announcer or whatever. Bring the Noise, to me, hip hop songs. If it's not the best ever, it's got to be my top handful.
Sure.
Too Black, Too Strong, like the positive embodiment of African Americans through that message, the power that he brought with that. And then again, as you said, Flavor Flav kind of egging him, yo, Chuck, what's going on? Tell me. And then this style seems wild. That's another one I still can probably bust out pretty well as an old white man. So heavy, right? Like, what is this? And then the Flavor Flav, Don't Believe the Hype. Not quite silly. I always thought about them like, and Chuck may have said this in an interview I've seen. I've read a lot of stuff about him. This is the 50th year, the anniversary of the birth of hip hop. I still don't know how they figured that out, what that date was. But the Black Creatures talked about this too. They have a lot of socially conscious songs. If you're always talking about heavy material, it can get wearisome for the artist. And I don't think Jade and Xavier were intentional about it, but I think Public Enemy might have been. If we're always talking about how screwed up everything is, it's just going to kind of wear people down. So we got to have a little levity, we got to do something to lighten the tone here. And so I don't want to say it's like Abbott and Costello, but we got to have kind of the serious guy, and we got to have the guy to kind of be like, we're just having a party.
Yeah.
I know a lot of artists I respect. They want to talk about things in concerts openly. And I'm like, dude, and I look around, I'm listening to every word you say. I agree with I appreciate you. They're here to have fun.
Yeah.
They want to jump around. Yeah. So you got to kind of mix that in a little bit.
Well, the same professor from grad school that I referenced earlier, he at one time, I think he was workshopping one of my pieces, talked about this notion of every piece of information you give the reader is a thing for them to carry in their shoulder bag up the hill, and the hill is your story. And at some point, you got to be mindful of the fact that you can't give them too much, because they're going to put it down, or they're not going to walk all the way to the top of the hill and see the
too
others.
Heavy.
Yeah, so like,
interesting.
You definitely need, I think, Flav to balance out the seriousness of Chuck. for me, looking back now, like Terminator X might be my favorite member of the group because there was some turntablists and some scratching happening,
Yeah.
but the good ones from this late 80s era really stand out. And the rest of them either sort of remain inaudible or not, they're not as skilled at their craft as some of the anyway.
Excellent point.
I think he's
Excellent point.
and I think there was some personnel. I think he was out after a few records and somebody else. I don't know.
Professor Griff had some
Yes,
issues.
yes.
That's a fascinating point, though, because, again, I think I like De La Soul. There's some cool scratching. I think of Jenny. It wasn't taking it to a level of art that I think Terminator X did.
Right.
And I'm way into, again, just DJs, whether it's DJ Spooky, Dr. Octagon. I mean, I'll go on and on forever of like people who scratch for a living. I told you about the Bob James show. I think that seeing them live at KU, I'm guessing that would have been 90. So the student union at the University of Kansas had shows. Not regularly, but I would say like 2-3 semesters that the student union group, the students they have a budget, and they still do these things these days, and they bring in artists.
Yeah.
And I had the chance to go see Public Enemy downstairs, kind of, I call it the ballroom, but that's not what it is. And I'll never forget just the way they entered the show. It was the S1Ws, who were like their security force, these guys holding like fake rifles, like Uzis, walking in. Professor Griff, who I believe was kind of ousted for a while for some anti-Semitic remarks and some other things. He was sort of like their commander and leader. So he'd be in the security brigade. Black Power, Black Panthers references that you're getting. And then Terminator X would roll in and take his space behind the turntable at the back. And then Chuck, Flav would walk in. And they literally parted the crowd at that show.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, they aren't just whatever, some rap dudes. They've got a stage routine.
Yeah.
So blown away.
Yeah.
And then I contrasted that with, I saw them, I would guess it was maybe a year later, and I have that ticket stub. It was called it wasn't the Endless Summer Tour, but Public Enemy headlined a tour at Kemper that included, because it would have been Welcome to the Terror Dome. It included Ice Cube, Digital Underground, Kid and Play.
Okay.
Do you remember that band?
Of course.
Kind of like Will Smith.
Eraser Fro.
And there was a fifth artist, but that was totally different. Now we're not at a student union, but they still had the same setup, and they adapted it for that set.
Cool.
And what was fascinating about that show, so we drove in from Lawrence to come to Kansas City for that. I'm guessing out of, let's just say 10,000 people there, maybe there were 20, 30 white people there. And for the first time really in my young life, I felt like this is a different environment. I'm not saying it was like bad or good or whatever, but like
it's different.
I'm here.
Yeah.
And I need to kind of understand what's going on here so I can understand, do I dance? Do I act the same way? Do I sing the lyrics that I want to sing?
Yeah.
Do I want to be that guy, And
you're always going to be that guy to someone.
That was an interesting night. And at the end of the night, driving back to Lawrence, we were all just like, there's never going to be a better live band for us. Seeing tons of live shows. They just brought energy without having any real live instrumentation.
Cool.
I think that was another big difference for me. Seeing an artist, not play to tracks, but basically everything was produced that way, some outside. But they were lyrically engaged, physically engaged, moving around the stage.
Emotionally.
And I could see how the audience reacted. There was actually a huge brawl.
Sure.
Lots of bad things happened later, unfortunately, to kind of mar that show. But for me, still, it's just a super powerful experience. Like, I want to go see more hip hop. I need to follow these guys for the rest of their time. And last point, as you mentioned, they have continued to release prodigiously. They basically said to the system, we're going to make our own label. We're going to start putting things out on our own. And we're going to go back and repurpose a lot of the songs that we did, kind of like Taylor. So we can have control.
Chuck's version.
And in a way of sampling, we're going to self-reference either with song titles, interpolated in a new fashion.
Okay.
Or lyrics are the same beats that we used as an homage in a previous song another way. They have kind of like the same sounds 30 years later. Some of
Cool.
the same samples, and it's not stale.
Right.
It's like, holy cow, you played that on your very first
Ezra
record.
Pound, make it new.
Exactly.
You know?
So, Louder Than a Bomb is another, I think, just masterpiece. Terminator X, To the Edge, that's just like a showcase. Can I get a show them what you got? I mean, from start to finish. There are a couple songs that maybe I could probably do without, but as a whole, it all works.
I mean, it's, you know,
For an hour.
every bit of an hour and 16 tracks, like pretty ballsy, you know?
Which I think, unlike the previous 3 records we've talked about, which were all originally released on a vinyl format, I think the rule we've always been told is like each side should be no more than, let's say, 20, 21 minutes. So total running like the 42, because you start to compromise some of the sonic fidelity because the grooves can't keep that. I'm not an audiophile, keep that. So in the CD era, when I don't have to be beholden to the 40-minute roughly structure, and I can put out a 60-minute, or actually an 80-minute, I think is the peak. Well, they really played with that. We're gonna put as much as we can get on that thing, get people their money's worth, and get out, more importantly, what they wanted to say,
Right.
and whatever art that they wanted to create.
Yeah.
These are smart people too,
Yeah.
by the way. I think all the artists we talked about, they're intelligent people. Not to say that most artists aren't intelligent people,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's a lot of intentionality behind, I think, what they were doing.
Well, absolutely there was. And I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but I love it that I'll probably never get tired of saying it. But a number of folks have had Paul's Boutique, which you mentioned, on their list. And there's a quote from Chuck D about that record that says, the secret amongst the black hip hop and rap community at the time of that record's release was that record had the sickest beats of anything that had come out, you know, kind of in that little window. And I was like,
Dust Brothers.
nice. Yeah.
So they moved on from the Rick Rubin kind of Run DMC formulated one. No, I love Rick Rubin.
Right.
They explored.
Yep.
And again, for my money, Ill Communication.
Somebody
I love the Beastie
just
Boys.
put Fight for Your Right to Party on the radio, and it caught, but it's not by any stretch the strongest track on License Still. There's plenty of other great songs to choose from if you were so inclined to pick a favorite or a top
Brass
three.
Monkey,
Yeah.
Till Brooklyn.
Yes.
Girls.
Yeah. Rhymin' and Steel. I mean.
Rhymin' and Steel.
Yeah.
And then we're going to sample Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
What in the world is that?
Yeah.
You know,
and also, you know, like the those crazy whatever they were doing for, they hadn't quite gotten to the deep end of new recording tricks like they would for Physical Graffiti, but for Led Zeppelin 4, you know, that the way the drums sound for Levy, like I was like, whoa, what is this? I've never heard a drum kit sound like that before in my life, you know. And they went right for it, and that sounds really cool. Plop, you know.
Yeah.
Very cool stuff. We should, you mentioned it briefly already, but give a quick shout out to Queen the Game, because it was put in the lineup and then got yanked last minute.
Yeah, I'll say this. So 8th grade year, 82, student council is going to have like an end of the year dance party. Curé of ours, my school.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I am in 8th grade. The cool kid that supposedly had like the DJ lined up, well, turns out the night of the party, he didn't have the DJ lined up.
Uh-oh.
Fortunately, I had one of those turntables that was like a suitcase. So it was like a big box, and the speakers were on the side. And when you open the suitcase, the turntable dropped down, and the speakers were on the side. So I don't know what I was thinking, but I packed my portable turntable, and I brought 5 records. It was Journey Escape, and I've come to kind of loathe a couple songs on that record.
I don't need to hear really any Journey again for the rest of my life.
I like Journey. Again, some of their early stuff is really great. Like,
okay.
When the Lights Go Down in the City. I mean, I want to bust out my lighter every time.
Sure.
That song just makes me weep.
That is a very good song. However, Don't Stop Believing. Like,
Exactly.
don't put that on.
You ruined it for me.
Yeah.
Karaoke.
Yeah.
But
Well,
then again,
and then
but
Steve.
again, One Love is pretty good. One Love. Stone in Love is okay. Anyway, so I had Journey, Escape. I had Foreigner 4, which also is a dynamite freaking record.
Nice.
I mean, and I had bought a couple like their early albums at garage sales. I love that band at that time. Styx, Paradise Theater. So I'm really dating myself. Queen, The Game, and then Buckner and Garcia's Pac-Man Fever.
Oh my God.
Dr. Demento, about 10 songs while I do the Donkey Kong and stuff.
I had it. Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. There was a Frogger tune on there.
Flock
right?
of Seagulls got left at home, unfortunately, the self-titled. No, that Queen record, again, starts out with the title track. It's just so weird and trippy, unlike the other stuff they had done. They were starting to kind of incorporate some different sounds. Another one, Bites the Dust.
One of the best bass lines ever written. I mean,
which is Chic, Good Times.
Good
Times, which is Blondie's Rapture. Same bass line, and another one. So which Grandmaster Flash captures all in the message.
Grandmaster Flash and Sugar Hill Gang, I think.
Furious 5?
Yeah, I think that, to me, that's always
that was a bridge.
But that's always been whoever figured out the 50 years. I always thought right there, that's the birthplace. It's probably a couple years before that, but
I'm no scholar.
Right.
I
anyway,
read different. Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Good one.
The second side's a little weaker, so that's why I didn't pick it. Like Sail Away, Sweet Sister, Coming. I mean, they're okay, but I guess what it was about Queen that got me. That album I spun so regularly, and then about a year or two after college, one of my cousins, I was like dog sitting my aunt's dogs, and he had a CDs at home, and he had like Night at the Opera, News of the World. Actually, he had them all on CD.
Wow.
And I started to dive in deep besides the stuff on the greatest hits, and I realized I just think they were a phenomenal band.
Brian May was incredible.
Still.
Is still.
I hope so.
Yeah.
They were just so good, and I don't know. I wish I had seen them live. I don't know that I ever actually had an opportunity.
Right.
But yeah, that just kind of that time period, like middle school, going into high school. There's just some things that stick out.
Yeah.
And so my point is, so this student council party, we had 5 records, and for the 4 hours of the night, we played those same 5.
Hey.
I played those same 5 records, and trust me, Don't Stop Believing and Open Arms and One Love filled the dance floor of the 60 8th graders every time. Doesn't matter how many times we played that song.
Yeah.
So I always remember that record.
Nice. So we spent a healthy amount of time talking Center Cut Records. We mentioned the link tree. Right now, the socials is
just follow us on socials. That's the main thing.
We talked about I think we talked about the podcast on Spotify before we were rolling, but
Center Cuts.
Center Cut, and there's upwards of 40 episodes. I believe.
Close to that.
I believe.
About a year and a half.
But they're out there if you want to go give them a listen.
And to kind of explain the premise of that too, the idea was we were trying to answer the question: what does the music industry need in Kansas City?
Yes.
A, and then B, don't just complain about what it is. What are your proposals for solutions? And we brought in venue owners, record store owners, and not just owners, but people that work there, other labels, music media press here in Kansas City. A lot of the people we just mentioned, obviously Michelle Bacon, Chris Agarian, Mark Manning, Steve Tulpana, Ann Stewart from Records with Merit. And it's kind of like what you did with your show. We ended up spending more time talking about the person's life. What were you influenced by? Did your parents have records? And then kind of what does the industry need got pushed to the back after the 2 or 3 hours.
Okay.
But I'd highly recommend.
Well, lucky for me, that's kind of what I'm not.
Yeah, let the tape roll.
Yeah.
Let the tape. It's all. I mean, I am so appreciative, and Jim, all of our guests.
If I feel like whoever it is, it doesn't matter. If you come sit and BS with me about a little bit about yourself and about some of your favorite music, and then later we've gone our separate ways and we're back in our life and we come across a thing that I think Kansas City needs to work on, or it could be anything. And then maybe we connect.
Yeah.
You reach out, hey man, I think it would be a good idea if, or vice versa. We know each other. We've sat and now I'm more motivated. I think more motivated to pitch in, give you a little time, give you a plug or whatever it may be. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like we've had dinner together, and now we're going on our second date, sort of thing. But so I know that there are the three prongs, which is put out music with local artists, issue stuff that either is a re-release, buried treasure, or never put out in the first place, and then the music industry in KC.
Yeah.
So that's the three-headed monster. Is there right now at this second, like sort of a first, front burner piece that you're working on, or is it just those three things driving together?
Yeah, as I mentioned too, the new artist development point, I think, was our initial thought, and there are just a lot of challenges involved in that, especially if you want to make money. And so, again, with limited time, or more limited time these days and resources, I feel like our focus has been, we've been talking about and meeting with a lot of folks about either reissuing or putting out music from the last 10, 20, 30 years that hasn't been released. Let's kind of close the deal on at least a couple of those in the next year.
Okay.
So I'd love to be able to put out a record before the end of this year.
Cool.
That also kind of depends. In general, it's not a good idea to put a record out, I would say, after
Halloween.
Even before September, personally, because it's end of the year.
School started.
Holidays. End of the year list. Grammy consideration. You want to go that deep. You kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And do you really want to go out and play a bunch of shows, which you would need to do to promote a record in December when it's freaking cold? So if we could put out one or two records in the next year, and again, there's a whole promotional strategy, so that means you basically have everything done 6 months before it actually comes out, because you start building, and then 6 months after that to continue to promote. I think that's an area a lot of artists forget about. Like, once it's out, you're not done.
Right.
You're actually just getting started.
Yeah.
But the music industry piece, though, is something that's really become important to me. Kind of like you just mentioned, like, now that we've talked, let's support each other. If we can shine a light on somebody a little bit extra, that's good. I have always had that. What's the cliche? Like, lifting the rising tide lifts all boats, or whatever that is. I remember when we first started the label, we only wanted to work with a handful. I only wanted to work with a handful of artists so I could be available to them. And I thought that, we can't sign everybody. We can't work with everybody formally in Kansas City, but it doesn't mean we can't support them. So my initial thought was, I want to write a blog.
Oh, cool.
I want to go to shows, and I want to write about it because there's not enough press here.
Right.
I want to do album reviews, and I want to do previews because there's not enough press here. And Jim said, well, but if we highlight such and such a band, well, then some other label will come and snap them up. And I thought, that's true, but we can't work with everybody.
Right.
So that's not a bad thing. That's good. That's putting out, it's showing how much talent's here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So let's choose wisely. It doesn't mean we have to stop support. And Jim's not saying let's don't support other people. So this past 6 months of 2023, again, I've really focused my energies, and we have, on whatever we can do to help any artist that we feel a connection with, that we, of course, think is talented, working hard, creating beautiful art. How can we help point people in the right direction to hear them? Whether it's getting them a show, whether it's writing a review. I actually started a workshop class last week that I want to talk to you about. I don't know what the acronym exactly stands for. It's like the Kansas Arts Industry Commission, but basically they are doing an 8-week series where art critics can get insight from other art critics around the country. And it's not just music, film, theater, dance, about writing about them and getting the word out about whatever it may be in the state of Kansas. I live in Missouri.
Right.
But whatever.
Yeah.
And just last weekend on Saturday, I did my first session. I missed the first one because of my parents' funeral. But anyway, It was awesome. We had an hour-long conversation with a young lady who does a lot of work. She's based in New Mexico, but working on all sorts of different events, talking about like how to get the message out about your artist. The second half, we were joined by a young man who writes for Essence. I don't think he's the editor-in-chief exactly, and just kind of pitching some of our ideas to them. And then we had to like do a sample writing.
Oh, wow.
So I reviewed the Free State Festival up in
Oh,
Lawrence.
fun.
And so we get feedback on that, and then the next step after those 8 weeks is then they send us out on the field to festivals where we are assigned to cover particular projects based off our interest. Like I wouldn't do it about theater; I'd find it about music. They give us an opportunity to have our work then published in a place where people are going to read our critiques.
Sweet.
And then potentially that could lead to paid or unpaid other opportunities.
Right.
And my point is, we just need more things like that.
Yeah.
There's some great organizations I want to just highlight real quickly here doing great things. One is the Midwest Music Foundation.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with them.
I've hit him up. I haven't gotten a reply from him yet about coming and doing this.
We'll make it happen.
Okay.
So
okay.
Rhonda Line has been a guest.
But
on
I think I just a comment on a tweet. It wasn't like anything official.
I guess the tough part for a lot of people is they have full-time jobs.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
what they do in the music, I want to say industry, is really a labor of love. And they're busy. Right. Exactly. And kind of like what we're doing these days almost at this point. But Rhonda Line was on our podcast. You can listen to her episode. Sandra Freeman. I mean, I can tell you about every single person, but those two ladies in particular, those two human beings, are just doing great things
Cool.
to support. The original intent was like artists' physical well-being, health care, services. Because as you mentioned, it's not an easy life. You got late hours. You're on the road.
Yeah.
Your diet's bad. All sorts of vices. But now they've recently shifted during the pandemic a little bit more towards the mental health aspect.
Cool.
So they offer a lot of services. Midwest Music Foundation continues to do great things
Cool.
in Kansas City. So check them out. Another organization is the Heartland Song Network.
Okay.
This kind of spawned out of the Folk Alliance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that organization. Again, doing incredible things here and around the world, to be honest. But they basically are trying to find ways to offer some of these practices, best practices, is what teachers like, to artists. Like, how do you get a contract? Like, what's a songwriting structure look like? How do you get involved in ASCAP so you can license your work? Sync licensing. They're doing songwriter sessions in the morning. They're trying to involve younger people, older people. Really, again, taking the time to just put some of these structures in place and help developing and even much older artists. Crossroads Music Fest is coming up. Bill Sundahl does a great job with that.
Cool.
It's been a benefit the last few years for KKFI. Great community radio station here. KKFI saves my life on Wednesdays. I listen all day, and they're archived for a couple weeks. We talked about 90.9 The Bridge. I believe is really the only radio station truly playing Kansas City music all the time, every day. Incredible staff, support so many artists. They've just finished their new station there. There's just got a beautiful new recording space there.
Wow.
Lots of things. The Mixmaster Conference, which used to partner with Crossroads, I'll be on a panel in September up in Lawrence. Nick Carswell's done that for about 10 years through his Silly Goose Records, which is all these things. How do you go out on the road? How do you get bookings? How do you promote a record properly? How do you
earn a living?
Again, I think we have a lot of puzzle pieces here in Kansas City and Lawrence. It's sort of like connecting and
We don't have the box to look at to figure out
like a one-stop shopping almost.
Yeah.
How does a normal person in Johnson County, north of the river, Raytown, find out what's happening on a Thursday night concert count? There are a lot of individuals and organizations doing things. I think our goal as a label is how do we put them together and then build off of that,
yeah.
so that
Very cool, man.
we represent the city not to become Austin,
No.
but to truly give Kansas City its proper respect and make it an economic driver for our city.
Sure.
So that artists can stay here, live here, have affordable housing, have health care, take a vacation occasionally once a year. You know what I mean?
I don't remember the number. I wish I did because it would make me look more intelligent than I am. But you mentioned a little bit ago about the 50 cents that goes into every dollar being spent on a night out for music. Somewhere I heard somebody say what they anticipated the money going into businesses during the Taylor Swift run, and I was like,
Big
I mean,
time.
of course, like, but until you hear it spoken from a quasi reliable source, it's like, yo, like, more of that, please, because there are a lot of great things about this city, but there's also a lot of things about the city that could be greater than they are.
Absolutely, and I know a lot of people have openly expressed their dissatisfaction on social media about the NFL draft and how that did or didn't impact our city economically. And my thought was, they're not going to come here to go to other businesses and buy your clothes or your food. They're going to Union Station for the draft. On the other hand, a major international artist like Taylor Swift, people are coming in town for the day, for the weekend, for both shows, and they are going to get a bite to eat somewhere else before. You know what I mean? So if
I think
Kansas
people
City,
are out spending money for the draft too.
I do too.
Anybody that's complaining about that, I'm not familiar enough to know why you would complain about that.
Yeah, I do too, but it has been noted by many people that I trust and respect that in a lot of ways Kansas City is still a flyover place as far as national touring acts, and that we don't get a lot of shows that St. Louis gets, for example. What St. Louis got that we don't have, that these days Tulsa, Oklahoma gets that we don't get, or someplace like
or
Denver.
OKC.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are we missing here? Like I look at some of these festivals in other neighboring cities, like the ones I just mentioned, Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm like, you got so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and we can't get one of those here? I told you I'm going to Jeff Tweedy tomorrow. The last time he was here solo 10 years ago, he kicked off his tour here. He went from here to Denver and then basically West Coast. And people were like, well, why would he start his... From the Star writer, he said, why would he choose to start in Kansas City? Was it like a test run? Like if he was no good or something? And I thought, no, the question you should be asking is, why aren't artists starting here?
Yeah.
Michael Jackson started the Victory Tour here,
Yeah.
or Jackson 5, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this is a great location because you
Yeah.
can go any direction. And there are great production companies like Mammoth, for example.
Yep.
I just encourage all of you to dive in deep to your local, whether it's Kansas City or Lawrence. Again, I mentioned Falia Fani, I Heart Local Music, doing great things there.
Cool.
She really shines a light on a lot of stuff. And she asks those kind of tough questions like, why isn't Lawrence getting this artist? Or is Lawrence getting this that won't go to Kansas City? You know?
Yeah.
So just educate yourself.
Yeah.
Support artists, especially when money goes directly into their pockets and not record labels, which doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Follow them on social media. Follow all these organizations. If you know someone that has a business or has a private event where they need someone, no offense to those cover bands around there, get some of our generative artists,
Right.
whether it's hip hop or speed metal or whatever it is that floats your boat.
Right.
Yeah. Appreciate all that you're doing too.
Of course.
By the way, Blake.
We need to get you out of here, but I have five hokey questions.
I was ready.
Okay.
Had to get that little plug in for some of our comrades.
All right. So you can visit your past self at any age. What age are you choosing, and what are you saying?
So not music related? Yeah, I knew that. Man, I love that middle school age that I teach. I just love adolescence. So I'm going to say 7th grade before you're jaded in 8th grade and think you know everything.
Right.
But past being naive in 6th grade.
Right.
A little green but pure.
Very well said.
Open your eyes and don't be so quick to judge. Have some empathy. I think empathy is
absolutely
something I learned much later in life. Take a step back from the kid who's getting teased by the other kids for no reason, and either you blindly sit there and allow that to happen or even join.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
We've told our daughter that if there's ever any exclusive, behavior or picking on or bullying or whatever you want to call it, if you're sitting there silent and not saying stop that, it's just as bad as being the person that's doing it.
Be an ally.
Yeah.
And be an active ally.
Please complete. The world would immediately become a better place to live if only.
No guns.
No guns. Easy. Love it.
They're bad. There's no good. It's like cigarettes. There's no good outcome. There's no good outcome. Don't give teachers guns. It's not making school safer.
So,
sorry,
I don't need you to answer this because you have already. But I told you it was in there. You mentioned artists in the area and the bio of Center Cut Records speaks to this idea of a sort of unification of talents and respect. What's the Kansas City arts and entertainment scene's biggest need currently? I think we've touched on it a bit.
I'm going to say just, media, press,
okay.
Written word, and way to get it out to the masses. I mean, another example is like Spotify, for example. Again, Chris Agarian, who I have just so much respect for at the Bridge, and then Paul Chandler, who's kind of started a new laser station, which was big in Lawrence back in the day. Both recently had posts about, like, when you go to Spotify, there's no way to search by location. So if I'm a green person from whatever suburb, or I keep starting to diss Johnson County, but I want to know, like, who should I know about in Kansas City? There's no central holding place. And streaming's good. How could we make a way to
include
pick 100
notoriety
artists from Kansas City, all different genres, and we just start there? And now we can't have everybody, but how do we just keep growing that?
Sure.
So awareness, and I specifically think it's through the press.
Somebody needs to make a local Kansas City artist playlist.
And we've dabbled with it a little bit with the label. Again, I do stream, but I listen to CDs and records and.
Lunch with anyone, dead or alive, who and why?
You make those desert island lists.
Yep.
I was just telling my son the other day about, like, to be in London or whatever back with the Beatles would be phenomenal. Anyone? Is this the same question you always ask? I should have been prepared for
I mix it up a little bit.
Yeah,
there's some repeats, yeah.
Man. I would pick someone alive, probably. Like Chuck D would be fascinating.
Oh, cool.
I'm really into social... I don't want to call them philosophers. Somebody like Noam Chomsky, I think, is just a Jedi. Not to keep focusing on men here, but my son and I love George Carlin.
Okay.
If I could sit down for an hour and just listen to him dissect culture in such a concise but detailed way.
Yeah.
That dude. I like humor.
Absolutely.
Again, people that lighten it up a little bit when things are so freaking depressing.
Yeah. God, I know. Tomorrow morning you discover that you are the proud recipient of $85 million. What's your first move?
Take a day off and figure out what I'm going to do. I don't know.
There you go.
I
love
mean,
it.
certainly probably have a party or something. But, save the planet. I mean, invest in good causes. But yeah, I think we work way too hard in this country. We talked about Japan before. America surpassed number of hours worked, per capita or whatever that term is. Several years ago, Japan, we work way too hard. We have no holidays. We have like 7 total holidays for the year.
Weird.
I mean, I'd just take a little time.
Yeah.
I think we don't take enough time to reflect in our lives because we don't have time to reflect.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What would you do? 85 million. That's turn tables for a sec.
Pay off the house. That's my first, like, eliminate, like, that takes
Eliminate
up bandwidth, up here, like,
sure,
like eliminating space that's opens up a lot of other things.
Still got to pay your property tax.
Whatever.
But it's going up.
But I'm not carrying it morning, noon, and night. Like, just this the cloud, the rain cloud just anyway.
I hear you.
Patrick Sprehe, Center Cut Records, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, we have a Twitter page, but I'm just not active.
Sure,
I can only do 2.
Fair. Well, you can do one of those Hootsuite or something where you post on one and it goes to the rest of them. I don't know.
I don't follow that practice. I've heard that it doesn't lead to.
I don't like it. I don't do it. I intentionally
separate posts.
And even for this, I'll I'll tweet about it, and I'll put in it when a new episode is out on Thursdays, and I'll do it. But there's some details that are going to be the same because it's you and it's your list, and so, but it's not going to be the same. And generally speaking, podcast aside, just for personal, I'm different in all three because there's too many people that I follow that like, the doom scrolling that I spoke of. It's like, man, I don't want to see your same fucking post in 3 spots.
Yeah,
like,
I hear you.
Mix it up a little bit.
But again, being very new to social media, the way I look at it is Facebook's for old people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram's probably for my 30, 35, maybe 40-year-old crowd.
Sure.
Twitter is for my son's age, but he's getting disenchanted with that, 19. And then, of course, you've got TikTok for the youth that's now being sort of copied by these YouTube Shorts and other things for older.
Instagram Reels.
I always tell artists, you can't avoid it, and actually you should use it because it's free.
Yeah.
It's just time of your day.
Yep.
So pick 2 that you feel suit you best.
Yeah.
I just don't post the same thing. I mean, I don't post and share that across those platforms because I just feel like it's getting more reach. And based off our massive reach of 10 people, it's really been effective, Blair. So,
you have 10?
Yeah. Whatever. Do whatever you want to do. There are no rules out there.
We were done until you said that, and it threw another one into my brain. True or false? It is okay and acceptable to wear the T-shirt of the band at the concert you're attending.
I'm going to Jeff Tweedy tomorrow. I keep talking about that. I have the shirt that I have the poster of in my room from 10 years ago, and I'm going to be freaking sporting that shirt, hopefully sitting front row again for his concert.
It's a Jeff Tweedy shirt?
Oh, yeah. He's got like a sombrero, and it's really cool. It's in Spanish.
All right.
If he calls me out,
sure,
it'll totally make my day.
Sure.
In general, no.
Okay.
Or at least, let's put it this way, not day of show purchase. Like, I'm not going to the show.
I would argue the opposite.
Oh, so if you got it, you're
if
representing
you bought it
there.
there and you want to throw it on, go for it.
Okay.
But we are almost all of us, probably 99% of us are at Jeff Tweedy because we're Jeff Tweedy fans. This is your opportunity to show me what else you're into, man. You like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Wear a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Maybe he notices that shirt, so I'm going to have that person open for me next time.
Yeah,
who is
right,
that guy?
Right, exactly.
We got to support. That's a tough one. I will say this, at my age too, like my concert T-shirt selection, I just cannot throw things away. But these last few years, pandemic, I'm starting to like. The
struggle is real.
I've had that Hoodoo Guru since the Shadow Show in '91.
Yeah.
I wear it once every 10 years. I probably don't need this. That Elvis Costello shirt from Exile Records.
My Grey Boy All-Star shirt that I'm wearing right now is probably 15 years old, and I never once knew to turn.
Oh, is that right?
Inside out, and so it's just fucked. But I'm like tough. I love those guys. So, thank you, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing, and
thank you.
I know it's a lot of work, man. Once a week, that's a grind. And
it is a grind.
Much time it is besides the 3-4 hours we just spent.
Yeah.
To edit. Plus, you're doing video.
Yep.
Hope that turns out well. Just saying, like, people. You got to start somewhere, right? So you're going to keep building, and I hope that in some way, Center Cut can help connect you with more people doing a lot of similar things, and we just continue to raise those boats.
Absolutely, I love it. I love the whole root system of support and growth and love that you've kind of touched on in everything that you've said tonight. So I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing. Hopefully I can do something to help you at some point down the road, or an artist, or whatever. But seriously, I appreciate you being here.
Did you guys see these handwritten notes, by the way? I need to give Blair some props, too.
It's just track listing and runtime.
Well, no. Well, it takes time, man.
Well,
you print something out.
But you keep going. You come across the occasional gem like
and I almost
John.
Some Center Cut stuff. John what?
There. One more.
George Roberto. So
no,
let's
go
get
one.
in the proper look, though.
There you go. There, Bob James. You come across the occasional gem that's got it there for you, and you're like, "Hey, freebie!"
Yeah.
Now, granted, I overlooked the fact that runtime is not on there for each of those tracks.
I know what they are. I looked it up, though. Again, they're all long. Again, I love all the album artwork. Thanks for taking the time to print this all out. Do your homework.
Yeah.
I did not bring my notes.
but you didn't need them. I mean, you got
To
it
be
all up
determined.
there, right?
To be determined.
Thanks, man.
Okay, best wishes.
All right, see ya.
Take care.